Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. From where I am currently here in South Korea to wherever you are in the world, greetings from the Contessa. For those who don't know, I am the creative Contessa, also known as Rachel in certain circles, and I am here to bring back our medieval sewing party and our getting dressed sessions together. So today I'm going to be getting dressed in the 1480s Florentine fashions, and I'll guide you through that step by step, and then we're going to jump right in to sewing. I'm going to be working today on my new Burgundian gown, which is a contemporary style up in Flanders to the style that I'll be putting on in Florence. As always, if you have any questions, pop them in the live chat. I am monitoring, but if I get into one of my usual spiels where I run off into basically if I start monologuing, let me finish my monologue before asking your questions, and then I will get to them. Good morning, Takeda. Lovely to see you. Susan, fantastic. So I'm actually going to start by combing my hair because I still have my braids I have my hair in my sleeping braids. So we're just going to start by unbraiding, combing, and then rebraiding. Unfortunately, I have no damsels here to attend to me. I have no condottiero to assist me. Otherwise, we would actually demonstrate hair taping. I cannot do hair taping on myself in any sort of elegant fashion. So we're just going to be doing what I call the quick and dirty conjectural 15th century braid bun. I'll show you what that is shortly. And I am going to show you also in this process of braiding my hair how you can eliminate elastics and microplastics from your hair styling system using finger loop braiding. So we will be using a medieval comb, a replica medieval comb, a simple version, but a replica nevertheless, of a medieval comb that you can buy at Cosmetica Obscura, right on their website, cosmeticaobscura.com, I think. And as always, when we are combing our hair in the Middle Ages, we have two sides to the comb. We have the large tines, which are designed specifically to get the knots out first. And then we have the small tines, which are designed to distribute oil from the natural oils from your scalp throughout your hair. And if you're using hair oil, this is the side of the comb that you want to use. Cosmetica Obscura also sells a replica 16th century hair oil that smells oh so divine. Gelbeline, welcome. Nice to see you this morning. And once we're done with the getting dressed process, I will definitely be talking about my discoveries at the Daegu National Museum, because as some of you know, on Tuesday, my time, which would for many of you be Monday, I was privileged to go to the Daegu National Museum and actually examine firsthand 16th century Korean garments. And that was an experience on multiple levels, not just on the fashion history level. So I'll share the entire tale with you. Yeah. So as you can see, and this is how I, by the way, everyone, this is what I use on my hair day in, day out. I don't use a brush. This is it. And so this actually has made it so that my hair is super silky and shiny. And I also wash it about once a week with the Aleppo soap that I also procured from Cosmetica Obscura. And if I want to do a deep cleanse where I really want to make sure I'm getting all the pollutants from the modern city in which I live out of my hair, then I actually use egg whites. I use an egg white wash. Susie Woods, welcome. Do I have plans for Christmas? I do not. I am going to be alone this Christmas, and I don't mean that to sound depressing. What I mean is I don't have any friends or family here. My condottiero is in Seattle visiting the children, and Christmas in Korea is not a thing. It's not really any sort of holiday. So Christmas for me will be like any other day. I will be doing a live stream with Philip from Irish Medieval History. We'll be doing a Christmas special and talking about medieval Christmas traditions. But otherwise, Christmas for me will just be another work day. Yeah, I know that sounds sad maybe, but we had a month of wonderful cruising and traveling around Europe back in October. So, I don't really feel like I need a break right now. Yeah, no special plans for Christmas. in my family, if my family were here, we'd have a tree, we'd be baking Christmas cookies and Christmas breads from my great grandmother's very old recipes. We of course exchange presents. We'd be making a lot of food for a big, massive feast. And then we would spend the 4 or 5 days after Christmas eating the leftovers from that big Christmas feast. But this year it will be a very low-key time for me. So I'll be working on content and teaching classes and making clothing and live streaming. Yep. So that's what I'll be doing for Christmas. Does anyone have any special Christmas plans? So as you see, the medieval comb actually works really well, especially when you use it day in and day out, and it just distributes those natural oils from your scalp really nicely. Okay, so now that it's all combed, I'm just going to put it in 2 very simple braids because, as I said, I have no damsel to assist me, no condottiero, no valet, no one to assist me today. So that means it's just me. And when it comes to doing my own hair, I'm pretty basic, pretty basic hair skills. It's funny because I love braiding silk, but I just don't want braiding my own hair. It annoys me and it's not comfortable. So here's what we're going to do. We're just going to do a simple 3-way braid. And to do this without elastics, actually, I'll show you first. So I have my hands free. I use finger loop braiding to bind the bottom of my braids and to do ponytails or anything. So this is actually a sample from a finger loop braiding class I taught. I teach finger loop braiding classes professionally. If you're interested in a beginner finger loop braiding class or an advanced finger loop braiding class, would be via Zoom. Let me know in the chat and I'll set one up. I do beginning, intermediate, and advanced classes. Usually it's a 2 to 3 hour workshop. We do a couple of different braids and of course then also provide evidence of finger loop braiding in the Middle Ages, talk about the techniques and the economy in which finger loop braiding was involved, lace making it was called then. So this is how I'm going to bind the bottom of my braid. No elastic, and this is linen, so nice natural fibers. Your hair looks thicker the more you brush. Yep, it does. It does. It gets fluffier and fluffier the more I brush it because it's being combed out of it was compressed into the braids overnight. Actually, it was probably compressed into the braids for 2 nights because I passed out last night. I was so exhausted, but I don't think I rebraided my hair last night. So that was 2 nights of compression braiding, basically. Yep. Okay, so now we're going to do a 3-way braid like so. Very, very simple, nothing special. I don't have evidence of any of braids in the 15th century that are anything but 3-way braids. I have no evidence of what we now call a French braid. So yeah, if you want to do French braids, it's not documentably medieval as far as I can tell. I'd be interested if any of you have found evidence of the so-called French braid being done in the Middle Ages or the 4-way braid. I haven't seen it myself. Some people ask me about French braids and how historical they are, and it seems, as far as I can tell, that the so-called French braid is a much more recent invention. At least what my digging around has turned up. As far as I can tell, 3-way braids are the way to go. Oh, I should explain what I'm doing. Let me unbraid. Okay, so when I get almost to the bottom of the braid, depending on how long my piece of lace is, my piece of finger loop braiding, right? Usually to about this point on a shorter braid. This one's not very long. Now I'm going to braid it into the braid. So I actually line the finger loop braiding, the piece of lace up with 2 of the 3 strands. And now I just braid it in, right? And I braid it a couple of iterations into the braid. And then I tie it off using what's left of the ends. And if you do this right, it should be evenly distributed. I didn't do it quite right, but I don't really care. I can still make it work. So now we just counter wrap the 2 ends. By counter wrapping, I mean you actually wrap in opposite directions around the base of the braid. And then I just do a half knot. And because this is linen and because it is lace, it is finger loop braided, it has natural grip. So half a knot is good enough. Now, if you have enough extra, you could tie a little pretty bow, but this is not going to be seen. It's going to be made into what I call the conjectural 15th century messy braid bun on the back of my head. And then I'm going to put a kerchief over top of it. So literally no one will see it. So good enough for government work, as the expression goes. Yeah. Mistress V, lovely to see you again. Welcome back. So now we move on to the other side. Once again, I do a 3-strand braid. And if my lace were longer, like if my lace were actually long enough to go the whole way down the braid, I might appear braiding it into my hair. But the ones I have are just short little, or actually this one is the broken lace from a gown, from a lace to lace the front of the gown shut, and it broke in half, as they do eventually when they wear out, and I saved the halves and they make really good braid ties. Right? Okay, so once again, I line up the two ends with the two ends of the lace with the 2 strands of my braid, and then I braid it in like so. And then when I get almost, most of the way down to the point where I start getting hair of varying lengths, I go ahead and counter wrap the ends of the lace around a couple of times just for extra stability. And then I tie a little half knot like so. And I let that go. And even though this one is silk, again, the finger loop braid technique gives it enough self-grip that I don't really need to worry about it coming undone. Okay, so then I just kind of fluff out my braid a little bit to make it nice, feel nicer on my head. I don't like the feeling of tight hair. I don't know about you. I need to have a little bit of fluff to my coiffure, otherwise it makes me a little crazy. Okay, so now we have 2 braids. This is what I call the very highly conjectural, unlikely to be authentic, messy braid bun of the 15th century. I only do this messy braid bun when I know I'm going to be covering it up with a veil or a kerchief. Make that clear. This is an act of desperation because I have no damsels here to assist me. I have no valet. And unfortunately, I can't really do any other 15th century style that's appropriate for a woman of my marital status, on my own. So, okay. So I take the 2 halves of the braids and I tie them in half. 2 halves. I take the 2 braids, tie them in half again until I can't really tie it in half anymore. And then I just tuck it into itself like that. And that is the messy braid bun. I then loosen my hair again a little bit because, again, I don't like the feeling of my hair being pulled taut from my scalp. It's very uncomfortable for me. Unleash a couple of cute little frillies like you see ladies have around framing their face in this era, right? And then eventually the next step after I put the gown on is going to be to put my kerchief on. There's no point in putting on the kerchief or veil now, though, because I have to put on my gamora. And the reason I did my hair first is because the sleeves of my gamora make it sometimes a little uncomfortable to have my arms up here for any length of time. So let me show you the gown we're putting on today. This is a gamora, a Florentine style gamora from roughly 1480. This was the first gamora I ever made back in 2000, so it's 25 years old. Still going strong. Very strong, actually. And that's possibly because it's made of synthetic silk. This is not natural fibers. I made this when I was a poor university student and couldn't really afford much in the way of fancy silk damasks, right, or silk brocades. So this fabric was on the $1 a yard pile at Joe Mars. If any of you are in Philadelphia and you remember when Joe Mars used to actually have a good fabric selection, yeah, those were the days, right? Okay, so the sleeves are not laced on. They are sewn on. In Florence, in this era, we see very little evidence of laced on sleeves. We see almost the only evidence I've seen from Florence from this era, from any era up to the end of the 15th century in Florence. The sleeves are sewn in. Now, that doesn't mean that I can't have sleeves of different kinds. I can absolutely wear this with a separate set of sleeves, but they're not laced in, they're not buttoned in, they're sewn in. And that's because every household that was even of a lower middling sort had servants, right? And so you would have a maid, the lady of the house could wake up that morning and say, I want this gamora with those sleeves. And the maid would snip the whip stitches that hold the sleeve in place, whatever there, take the pair of sleeves that the lady of the house desires to wear and whip stitch them in. It doesn't take terribly long, especially when a maid does it regularly. She gets really good at this. And remember that the pace of life in the 15th century was slower for everyone. Clocks are just sort of becoming a thing, but we haven't yet hit the Industrial Revolution, so life hasn't become so hideously regimented that we're chased into a state of anxious industry. So people had more time to do things like dress in the morning. Everyone had more time to dress in the morning. I don't mean just, some of you are going to scream, oh, only the privileged few. No, no, no. Everyone's life was more leisurely in the 15th century in terms of how much time was allowed to be taken for activities. So keep that in mind. The modern scurry is not a historical reality before the Industrial Revolution. It just isn't. Now, did people work long hours? Sure, depending on their job, their profession, and the season. But it wasn't a constant, not like in the United States where everyone's always working all the time, long hours. That's not how medieval life was. Medieval life had many more holidays. People could take off, were given off, and feasts were hosted by the wealthier members of society, the aristocrats, the patricians, for the lower classes on a regular basis. So people's impression of poverty and extreme class disparity, when they apply that to the Middle Ages, they're applying it inaccurately to the Middle Ages. Okay, so now the sleeves you see are already laced up. That's the other thing I like about this dress. I can get dressed on my own. Now, yeah, if I had a lady's maid who lived with me permanently, then maybe I would unlace these sleeves and to take them off. But thankfully, they're roomy enough that I don't need to unlace them to take them off. Would a 15th century Florentine patrician have just slipped off her gamora without unlacing the sleeves? We don't know. I haven't found evidence of that. I do, though, because I can, and because unlike a real patrician Florentine lady of the 1480s, I don't have a lady's maid with me. So yeah, but this is what it looks like. I'm going to, in a moment, after I get the gown laced up, I will adjust the linen sleeves. Okay, so now to lace up. This is a lacing bodkin, and it is a replica of an extant one that we see in one of Ghirlandaio's portraits. The lady she's wearing a pink gamora, and she's actually just wearing her gamora. No, because that's portraits. Lots of portraits portray ladies in their home clothing rather than their fancy party clothes. And you can see this this basically bit of twisted wire with a hole at the top, with an opening at the top. You can see that attached to the end of her lace. Now, I suspect that hers was actually the lace, the Fingerloop braid was done directly onto this. And I haven't done that yet because I only have a few of these and I have multiple laces. So this one, actually, my condottiero tossed together last week before he left because all of mine have vanished. They are vanished. The goblins that inhabit this apartment have made off with, I had 5 of these. These were replicas made by Kate Ramsey, who I don't think is on Etsy anymore. Right, I had 5 of these replicas and now they're all gone. So yeah, no idea where they went. The question was, were bangs fringe a thing? Yes, in 15th century Italy, second half of the 15th century, bangs become a really big thing. But bangs, not like we understand bangs, not like this, fringe. So they would actually take a pretty large amount of their hair and that would frame their face in a fringe. And they did definitely cut their hair. You can see there's a couple of depictions of women who are mourning. They've ripped off their veils and they're kneeling and screaming in anguish. I'm thinking of the Miracle of the Boy, which is depicted in Santa Trinita in Florence on the Cappella Sassetti, right? The mother is kneeling and her hair is down as a sign of distress and anxious mourning. And you can see, if you look closely, you can see that the front part of her hair has been cut very short, like by very short, I mean like to her chin. And even though all of her hair is down, she still has this fringe that's visible. as being at the front part of her hair. So yes, fringe was absolutely a thing in the second half of the 15th century in most parts of Italy. But it's not the kind of fringe where you've got bangs that are across your forehead the way they started doing them back in the 40s. I think is probably the first time, no, the 20s. The 20s is probably the first time I can think of that kind of fringe being popular. Oh, maybe the 1880s. Anyway, like modern fringe. That's not a medieval thing. I have never seen that style of fringe on any particular depiction, but we do see it. We do see a kind of fringe, a kind of facial frame. Absolutely. So yeah. Now there's debate, and I've been experimenting with how to create the curls that you see and the waves that you see. I have seen one object in one German manuscript from the 15th century, illumination from the 15th century, depicting what might be a curling iron, but it's not like a curling iron like they look now. It looks more like a crimper with a curling rod in it. So they could have absolutely used a hot iron, therefore, to create those really nice curls or waves that you see going down the fringe. We know that in the 16th century, we have manuals detailing beauty concoctions from the 16th century that present multiple recipes for curling your hair through perming your hair through chemicals. These chemicals are scary, though, and I have no interest in either working with these chemicals nor applying them to any part of my person. Honestly, modern perm chemicals are scary, and I have no interest in working with them or applying them to my person. So 16th century people at the very earliest also had an idea of how to use chemicals to curl their hair. I'm not interested in using any of those terrible chemicals to curl my hair, though. And I also don't really want to do hot iron curling either, because that damages your hair. Right? It just does. So I have been experimenting with not rag curls, but tied curls. There were no pin in this era. They don't have the right kind of pins to do pin curls, but it's really easy, we found, to take a piece of yarn and then I'll demonstrate in a moment what I mean on my hair, basically. It's really easy to take your hair, wrap it around your fingers like this to create a curl, right, like that, and then use yarn to secure it in place the night before, and then take the yarn out the next morning, and you will also end up with curls. We've been experimenting with this to try to get it to look more like the portraits. I haven't been quite 100% successful yet, but I think I should be able to make it work. Because again, I don't want to use the 16th century and therefore conjecturally 15th century chemical method, nor do I want to use a hot curler on my hair. Yeah. From ancient to modern, women love applying toxic items to their personage. Oh, my dear Shellback Bow, you said women. Men also have been doing that from since time immemorial to the present day. And in the Middle Ages, men did this as well. There are depilatory creams, for instance, that men used in the Middle Ages that were made with orpiment and camphor, and that whose recipe in the trota and the trotula is followed immediately by a recipe for a burn cream. Okay, so next I'm going to go ahead and put a little bling on. I never got around to my sleeves. Okay, so at this point, I'm all laced up, right? You can see that V. And now I'm just going to tuck this little half bow into the end and underneath so you can't see it. And now I'll just make some adjustments so that the collar of my camita is all nicely done, right? And then it's time for sleeve adjustments. So it is easier to do these sleeve adjustments with another person doing it, but I can do it. So basically, we have no evidence of the camice in this era, the shirts, the smocks, being chemise is the French word. The word chemise does not enter the English language until like the 18th century, just so you all are tracking. This would have been called a smock, a smocca in 15th century English. So this smocca, camicia in appropriate Italian, they don't have cuffs, and they So the width, the body, the fullness of the camicia is not gathered into a cuff in any kind of way. It's just kind of gathered up by the sleeve, and then you just have to adjust it. Now these sleeves, honestly, on this camicia, I've decided they're too wide. They don't need to be this wide in this era. Anyway, they don't need to be this wide, but the next one will be made differently. Okay, it's cartridge pleated to a band. We see cartridge pleating in the portraits of this era, and we have a couple of extant smocks hemde from Burg Lengberg, Schloss Lengberg in Austria that also have cartridge pleating. So yeah. And now we'll do the poofing. So we just make it pull the linen through the openings at the lacing and the openings at the elbow so that we have that nice poofing that you see in the portraits. Now, people always say, well, my poofing is never as perfect as the portrait. Of course it isn't. Of course it isn't. Why are portraits not necessarily a 100% Italian portraits, not necessarily a 100% faithful representation of how clothes actually looked when you wore them and moved in them? Because Italian portraits weren't seeking to depict full reality. They were seeking to depict an ordered world, especially Florence. An orderly world. The women were supposed to be depicted as being modest, right? Even if they were the wealthiest woman in Florence, they were still supposed to embody and engender this patrician Florentine modesty. So of course, everything will be perfect in the portrait. The collar will lay exactly as it should in a world that doesn't really exist. All the poofs will be perfect, and none of them will be uneven, because that was the Florentine style of painting. The people who were into ultra-realism, into hyper-realism, those were the Flemish painters. And that's why, interestingly, Florentine patricians would hire Flemish painters to come to Florence and paint their portraits for them, or paint altarpieces and whatnot for them. So even though the style that was popular in Florence was this sort of idealized style, they still recognized the amazing accomplishments of the Flemish masters and hired them to come and paint in the hyper-realistic style. So yeah, just remember that portraits are not going to generally, a portrait is not going to capture the effects of wind. It's not going to capture the effects of movement. It's not going to capture the effects of sweat. So you might say, oh, well, your dress isn't quite as perfect as it is in the portrait, or your hair isn't, your curls, that was a complaint. Your curls are not perfect the way they are in the portraits. Of course they aren't. It's a freaking portrait. It's not a picture. It's a painted portrait, and it's purposely idealized so that not a single hair is out of place, of course. Yeah. Portraits were the Instagram filters of their day. Absolutely. Medieval portraits, or late medieval, early Renaissance portraits, and even Renaissance portraits absolutely automatically came with what we would now call an Instagram filter, right? So you have to keep that in mind when you are viewing them in terms of what is realistically depicted and what isn't. Did they use a camera obscura? The camera obscura is yes. There are many, we have art manuals from this era showing a camera obscura being used. Now, if you're talking about the Dutch masters, maybe. We know that by the 16th century, it's definitely being used. And I have seen a woodcut, I believe, from the end of the 15th century showing the camera obscura being used. So it is highly likely that they were using the camera obscura. Yeah, of course, then you say, well, is that cheating? Well, is it though? Because even if you're using the camera obscura to get the sketch, the outline of everything, you still have to have mad skills to layer the paint on in the way that they did to capture all of those details. So honestly, if I were a Dutch master, I would absolutely use the camera obscura to get the outlines down, and then I would focus all my energy on using the paints to create those amazing effects and layers. Okay, so last 2 items left for today's getting dressed anyway, because I'm dressing for the home, right? I'm at home. You are at home with me. We are having a private sewing party, basically. So I'm just going to put on a modest bit of bling. This is a copy of a jewel that was owned, and modest is in quotes, owned by Beatrice d'Este. She is depicted in her portraits. She's depicted with it suspended from her fillet. right? But that fillet, gems being suspended from a fillet is not a Florentine fashion as far as we can tell. That was done in Milan and possibly also Venice. So for my purposes, I will be taking that beautiful gem. This is a replica made by Armor and Castings, and just look at the detail. So this is what we don't know because we only see her gem from this side, but they've gone ahead and added on the back this amazing detailing so that even if it flips over, it's okay because it's still pretty on the back side, right? So if you would like to buy this, it wasn't expensive. This was only $50 from Armor and Castings, and it's gold plated. So I just put it on a lace, finger loop braided lace, right? No chain or anything like that. We do know that they had some kind of knit wire that they were using in this era. I just don't have that. I haven't done wire knitting in a very long time, so I don't really have the skills for that. Last time, I've only done it once, and it was back in 2010 or 2011. Anyway, these pendants, as some of you may call them, they can actually be attached in a variety of ways. And I have 2 videos that show on my YouTube channel, 2 shorts, and I think maybe on my Facebook and Instagram as well, that demonstrate different ways that men and women can apply these beautiful pendants to their person, because there's lots of different ways. Wearing it as around your neck, pinning it to your hair or to your hat, pinning it on your shoulder, pinning it on the sleeve. There's lots of different ways that one can apply these beautiful adornments. So yeah. And if you would like to, Armor and Castings is a channel sponsor. You'd like to go and purchase one of their many fine replica items, Contessa 10 as one word will get you 10% off. So for today's purposes, before we get sewing, we have one last item, the kerchief. So I'm going to be putting on my Flemish style kerchief because I have to still make honestly, I have to make a Florentine style kerchief. But I have seen something very similar to this depicted in some frescoes in northern Italy from this era. So it's conjectural, maybe not 100% authentic for a Florentine woman to have worn a kerchief like this, but this is what we're going with because this is what I have, and I don't have someone to help me make my hair pretty and stylishly done, so we're just going to cover it up. This is the easy version. Yes, I could do some veiling. Maybe next time I'll show you how to do the veiling that women in Florence used to do, married women specifically used to do. But for now, we're going with quick and simple. Yeah. Okay, moving on to the sewing part of our question. So this is what I call the at-home Florentine ladies ensemble, right? I, as a lady, capital L, as a patrician lady, a member of Florentine society, I would not go out dressed in just my gamora. Never. Not going to happen. Servants did that, absolutely, but not ladies of my rank and stature. So if I were going to go outside, I would have to put on another layer, which I will not do for the purposes of this thing, such as this. This is called a cioppa, C-I-O-P-P, and it laces closed over top of this dress, and it's open basically all the way down the front, right? So that is one potential option. It has a train. It's made of silk damask. But I'm not leaving the house, at least not as part of this live stream, and so I'm not going to put on the top layer. We're going with Florentine casual. You might want to view the gamora in this case as the Lululemon of the era. Okay, fantastic. So time to rearrange the studio a little bit. And if you are enjoying this live stream, don't forget to like and subscribe, everyone. Oh, Eveline, thank you so much. Yeah, I really like this gamora quite a bit. It fits me very well, even though I made it 25 years ago. Yes, that's right. I have the same figure that I had 25 years ago. So yeah, we're just going to reset the scene a little bit, and I'm going to drink a little bit of tea. Now, tea does not exist in medieval Europe, at least not Camellia sinensis, not proper tea leaves. But what they do absolutely have as a beverage in medieval Europe are tisanes, right? Where you steep herbs and flower blossoms and possibly even berries in hot water. So that is called a tisane. That is not tea. But we have, for instance, recipes for it in the Goodman of Paris, Le Ménager du Paris. He actually provides several recipes for tisanes that you can make for guests and serve. And he says you can serve it chilled. In fact, chilled is a strong word. Cold. You can serve it cold. So if you would like to have flavored water the medieval way, there are recipes for it. Okay, let me go ahead and move the camera forward. Everything forward, bring you closer to me, as it were. Okay, fantastic. Yeah, herbal tea in the modern tongue. Well, I think tisane is also the French word. So tisane is the word I see in all the posh tea houses that I go to. So I think it's also sort of the posh word for herbal tea. Herbal tea is more of the workman's. Yeah, I guess that's probably the more workaday word for it. Yeah. It might also be a difference between European English or British English and American English, possibly. Okay, so time to invite. We have a guest who's going to be joining us for at least part of today's stream, because we're going to talk about a potential project that I'm going to be working on, a collaboration with Philip from Irish Medieval History. And he is now in the waiting room, basically. So I'm going to go ahead and invite him in, and then we're going to talk about our project. And I know, Susan, you want to hear about my adventures at the Daegu National Museum, examining 16th century Korean clothing, hanbok, as it's called, modernly, and we will get to that. But first, we're going to go ahead and invite Philip in to the okay.
Yo, come in.
Yo, let me see. Now let me see. Let's play with the setting a little bit.
You stretch out. I literally just woke up again.
You literally just woke up again. Good for you, man.
I swear, just as I finished talking to you, I napped and I woke up just as you sent your message there to jump on, just on time as well. I was like, oh, that's great. I just rolled over, put on my shirt, and back in again.
Yeah, the dedication that we put into our live streams. So
I feel like a cat right now. You know when a cat has to wake up and starts doing the stretching?
Yeah, people call me a cat because literally I spend the whole day, periodically every 15, 20 minutes, I actually just stretch like a cat. But you know what? I'm 45 and move like a 20-year-old. So I think living like a cat is maybe the way to do it.
Yeah, but you do a whole load of kickboxing as well, so
I do all sorts of things. I'm an active person. I never stop moving. If I stop moving, I generally fall asleep. So
that was your running thing yesterday. I remember people were trying to push the boundaries of what you could do in that dress.
Yeah, it's like, well, I can ride horses, kickbox, I can parkour somewhat. If the limits on the dress are it's not this part that would limit my parkouring, it's the skirts that go to the ground. Yeah. So we've got an exciting project that we'd like to upon which we would like to endeavor, do we not?
We do all right, because we want to do, what was it called? Make clothing from the Franciscan friar of Ennis in County Clare. They have a nice little effigy there, and they also have, what was the name of the other thing? The name of the seat again? It is. What's that?
The name of the name of which thing? I mean, so more generally though, we're talking about 15th century Irish clothing, right? So that's our goal. So yes. So everyone, you all love Philip, and you've seen Philip. And let me change the view if I can figure out where that screen is. Let's see. There we go. Yeah, but yeah, there's Philip in less horizontal, more vertical format. And many of you have said that you're tired of seeing him in just a t-shirt. And so we would like to change that. We would like him to also be dressed in stylish 15th century clothing. And
Mm.
because he is an Irishman, as you can tell from his accent, although what is
Yeah,
it? Some
sure.
people say you're from New York, bizarrely,
Oh,
right?
do you remember that? Like when somebody
Yeah.
turned around and says, "Are you from New York?" Yeah, there's always.
No.
I always love watching the reaction of Americans when they see another foreigner turn around and say, "Hey, are you from New York?" And just watching their face suddenly go into rage. Like, does he sound like he's from New York? Is he?
No, you don't. I don't know why anyone would say that. It's ridiculous. But the point is that we would like to dress Philip in 15th century Irish clothing, but it is not, and the goal is that I will work on making it. We will be doing the research together.
Mm,
But as some of you may know, it is not cheap to make clothing like that. It'll take hundreds of hours to make a complete ensemble, from the shirt and the underthings to the doublet and the gown, and of course
mm,
all the time that will be spent researching it also. And we want to share that research with you so that those of you who are interested in medieval Irish clothing can
mm,
actually maybe have some real information that could be useful in recreating your own. So we have
mm.
started a GoFundMe, haven't we, Philip?
Yes, we have. And so far, even this morning, very successful, hasn't it? It's been doing
Yeah, I
quite
was,
well,
I was,
actually.
I was, we've had some really generous donors actually.
Yeah.
So if you are interested in seeing the process, seeing 15th century Irish clothing recreated, we're talking the last quarter of the 15th century,
Mm,
based on primary source evidence, based on documents, based on literature, based on the few images that we have from 15th century Ireland. If that interests you and you would like to support that, we do have a GoFundMe set up.
mm,
And we plan on live streaming a lot of the process. I'm not going to, if the GoFundMe raises enough, I'll even do a
mm.
proper project log like I've done for my gamore and other garments. But that everyone, you have to understand that project logs, they take a lot of time to put together and edit
Yeah,
together and make really pretty. So we'll have to raise a significant amount of money for me to put together a full project log. But we will
mm,
be live streaming a lot of the process, and we'll be sharing little shorts as we go along, which take much less effort
mm.
to put
Yeah.
together. Yeah. Yeah. So why is it, so Philip, why is it you settled on the 15th century for your fashion choice? Because Irish fashions change over time, and so you have lots of stylish options. What made you go with the 15th century?
Well, do you want the long story or the short story?
I mean, how long is the long story? Are we talking four
Like
hours
since I
or?
was well, I just it's just ultimately it is my favorite era, the 15th century, and as you said yourself, like I grew up in Ireland, so I was always surrounded with medieval history, but I was always in particular, especially growing up in Mallow and having Mallow Castle, slightly biased towards the period that was the Wars of the Roses in Ireland,
Ah,
and obviously most people are into the Wars of the Roses happening over in England between the Yorkists and the Lancastrians. Well, at the same time, it's funny because it's like a mirror war happening. You have fighting between the Butlers and the Fitzgeralds over the Irish Parliament, the control of the Irish Parliament, over the title called Lord Deputy of Ireland. And if you at this point, because the English have lost so much control of Ireland, basically, whichever family becomes dominant within the Irish Parliament at that point basically runs all of Ireland, even has more power than the King of England. Now, granted, as you've seen there, Rachel, once the Tudors have taken over England, they very quickly sweep over and start taking over Ireland as fast as they can afterwards, and they have the entire Tudor conquest. So, it was a great little victory while it lasted, But for that little glimpse of time, Ireland is quite independent and it's even pushing for more independence. And then at one point, with the Battle of Stokefield, even invades into England to go and fight the Tudors. And there's other ways as well, where you can see Irish militaries being raised up and getting involved with the fighting over in England as well between, and that's mirroring the fighting that's over in Ireland as well between the Butlers who are supporting and being supported by the Lancastrians, and then vice versa with the Yorkists being involved with Fitzgeralds, and the Fitzgeralds being very much involved with the fighting with the what was it called, the Yorkists.
Right.
So it's an
So
absolutely amazing time.
I get the impression, though, that in Irish living history circles or reenactment circles, the 15th century is sort of like the bastard child, right? Like
Yeah,
no one seems to be doing the 15th century, and there's no 15th century reenactments in Ireland, right?
yeah, it's starting. You see, okay, so this is where there's a huge problem, and I do want to bring more guests on over to my channel to try to explain this. But the problem is, first off, everyone's kind of around the 16th century, and the reason why they're around the 16th century is because we have so much literature, especially clothing, well, pictures and wood carvings of how the Irish are dressing at that point. And the reason why we have so much is because, the Tudor conquest of Ireland. So
Right.
the English are going in and documenting all this stuff. The problem is with that is that you were getting a very much an English interpretation. And as you've pointed out, and Dr. Owen O'Neill has pointed out, this is the same time where the English are kind of romanticizing themselves as the Romans. And they actually love the idea of the Irish playing the savage barbarians and them going in and physically civilizing the Irish. They love this idea. This really comes alive. Dr. O'Neill was saying last week, he was turning on and saying like characters like Shane O'Neill who play up to the kind of savageness of being a barbarian. You've also looked through the clothing logs and stuff of the O'Neills as well, and you can see how the O'Neills would play up to that whole idea of backward, savage people that need to be civilized.
Right.
Mm,
So yeah, that's part of the problem, right? Is that the second
yeah,
you other a group in that way, and
yeah,
set yourselves as being above them, then any any chronicles, any depictions are going to emphasize that savage nature, right?
mm,
So yeah, the question then begs, well, how much of that is true? How common
yes,
was it, for say men to walk around in nothing but a linen shirt in the dead of winter?
mm,
And I mean nothing else, no shoes. No, like what? That never made sense to me in any.
mm,
It's literally freezing. You will get frostbite. Possibly you will like lose limbs if you just walk around barefoot like that in the dead of winter. Who
mm.
is doing that? Right? So
Yeah,
or were
like
or were medieval Irishmen genetically superior to modern Irishmen? They had some kind of special superpowers. Yeah. So
for sure.
it always does beg the question, how accurate are those depictions? And it's frustrating that there aren't almost any in the 16th century anyway. There are very few Irish depictions of the Irish.
Yeah, and it's always difficult to try to dig it out. But then when people looked into the 15th century, there appeared to be even less work done in that area. But as we were showing yesterday, there's actually quite a lot to work with. Like
There
we
is.
had our live stream yesterday, and we were poking out clothing like there was no tomorrow. And I was
Yeah.
absolutely in love with a lot of stuff because I'd never seen, and I never even came up to a conclusion like that before. A lot of it was, thank God, down to you and the eye that you had, because the stuff you were picking out, I could have never picked out, to be quite honest with you, especially with that Italian link. And even more so, which fits in with the literature of the Fitzgeralds at the time, because as you know yourself, Rachel, the Fitzgeralds are trying to be as Italian as they can be at that period, because as we were joking around the other day, the Fitzgeralds are no longer the Fitzgeralds. Sure, they're the Geraldini. Do you know yourself?
Right. Yeah. The Gherardini, not Gerald.
Ah,
Gherardini. Harji.
Geraldinis.
Geraldini.
Oh,
Yeah, so it's funny that there's this weird idea that there's no depictions of Irish people in clothing in the 15th century, but you know what I think it's more? You know what I think the real issue is? Ha.
what's that?
So the depictions that we have from the 15th century don't fall into the narrative of what people want to think of as Irish
Yeah,
clothing.
Mm,
I think that's the problem, and I think people historically, people doing either medieval Irish reenactment or medieval Irish fashion studies or history of Irish fashion studies have looked at the 15th century depictions and dismissed them. Oh, those are just all English. That's just all
yeah.
English. None of those
Mm,
people are Irish. They're just dressing, they're either English people made by English artists or they're dressing like the English. So that can't possibly be the way the Irish were dressing in this era
mm,
because it doesn't fit in with that wild Irish narrative of men running around with nothing on but a shirt and a vest, basically,
mm,
and women running around with about as little. It's so
yeah.
I think that might be part of the issue going leading up to now is that no one wanted to believe that those figures we found could actually be Irish.
Yeah, that's a massive problem as well, for sure. And yeah, you're bang on right, because sometimes you see people just kind of, especially, I'll wait until after Christmas because there is a lot of new books out and they're somewhat covering the Wars of the Roses, but I feel it's exactly what you said there. It seems to be that people are getting what's in the 16th century and then applying it into the Wars of the Roses in Ireland. And the problem I have with that is that the Wars of the Roses in Ireland and the Tudor conquest, they're two completely different wars.
Right.
Even
Yeah.
the stages of the Tudor conquest are two different complete stages. One is the period of Henry VIII, and the other one is the period of Elizabeth. Um, so I wouldn't apply any of it, to be honest with you,
Right.
especially into the Wars of the Roses in Ireland.
Yeah, it's you just and you the attitude of the Yorks and
Mm,
even early Henry Tudor, right, towards the Irish is not the same
mm,
as, the one with which Henry VIII comes onto the scene. And honestly, I would bet you dollars to donuts that Henry VIII's attitude towards the Irish starts really changing once he decides that he's going to be the head of his own church, right?
yes.
So I'm
It's
I'm pretty confident that there's going to be a parallel between I am now the Pope and
mm,
those Irish Catholics who refuse to give up their religion and follow me. They're obviously too wild and uncivilized to follow me as the head of the church. So now I need to go
yeah.
and civilize them, right? Like,
Yes, you're actually bang on right. Because if you look at O'Donnell, for example, Hugh O'Donnell, that was active during the Wars of the Roses in Ireland, when Henry VIII takes over, he goes to have a, what was it called, a pilgrimage. He takes a pilgrimage to Rome, and on the way back, he actually calls in to see Henry VIII. So it literally bangs into exactly what you were saying there about his sudden change, because afterwards, that's when the likes of the O'Donnells and the O'Neills become the most savage of the savages.
right,
Like the north of Ireland is seen as the capital of this most savage race of Celtic people in the world, which
right.
fits in with their rewriting of everything, where they see themselves as the civilized Roman trying to civilize these barbarians.
And you occasionally drop the phrase the wild Irish. And I'm going to tell you that in all of my research before the 16th century, I have never seen the words wild Irish in
Mm,
English. Never.
yeah.
What I see is I have seen the words the enemy, but I
Mm,
mean, that's not racist. That's just the way one people look at another people, right? Like the enemy.
mm,
So for example, the statutes of Kilkenny don't talk about the wild Irish. They
mm,
refer to the Gaelic Irish
mm,
as the enemy
mm,
because they were
mm,
relative to Edward III's, because it was Edward III who passed those laws, relative to what he was trying to accomplish in Ireland. People
mm,
trying to come into the Pale and raid and take power were obviously viewed as the enemy.
mm,
That's not racist or ethnicist or anything like that. So they refer to them as the enemy, which is definitely not synonymous with wild.
mm.
So it's
It's
I
true.
think I think there's a tendency of, and you do see the term wild Irish, especially in the second half of the 16th century. So I think again there's a tendency to just automatically back extrapolate that, oh well,
Mm,
if they're saying that in the 16th century, they must be saying that earlier. Show me primary source evidence and then I'll believe you. And no one has been able to point me at primary source evidence of that.
mm, mm, mm. The English are the enemy. Always are. Always will be. Old fashioned. Yeah, it is funny one, all right, especially politically, Sean, especially when we are going into the what was it called happening in 2030 and stuff, when you've got the pushing of the unification of Ireland as well, where you see people digging all this stuff up again. As you've pointed out before, lads, like we tend to use the phrase 800 years of British occupation, but the British have only been occupying Ireland until 1803. It's not until 1803 that finally England is occupying Ireland, like, fully occupying Ireland.
Right,
They're
right.
heavily involved, but I understand, and as I've said, what was it, 4 years ago when I made that video on the myth that is 800 years of British occupation. It's not that they actually occupied Ireland for 800 years. It's the feeling that they occupied Ireland for 800 years. That they're constantly involved in our politics over and over and over again. But then you see, as Rachel has pointed out, when then comes down to, from a non-biased view, tidy up this history, it's sort of a mess, because then you've got the term wild Irish being dumped here, dumped there, dumped everywhere. And sometimes you need to take a step back and saying, okay, did this person actually have this view, or are we scarecrowing these people?
Yeah.
So yeah, you bring
Yeah,
out a big, very good point.
I know, and unfortunately with today's politics, the
Mm,
geopolitical situation, the zeitgeist in which we currently find ourselves, it is
mm,
particularly popular to look back at history and try and find as many monsters as we can to vilify people, and especially to have, the David and Goliath syndrome, right? So it's really
mm,
popular, for instance, to look at Ireland in the Middle Ages and say, oh, poor little
mm,
Ireland, just oppressed and downtrodden and beaten. And it's like, in the Middle Ages? No, that's not the
mm.
impression I get, right?
Yeah,
After the Middle Ages, yeah, sure. I mean, the
yeah,
plantations were horrific. The potato blight, oh my freaking God.
mm,
Yes, but that's not, again, we can't just say, well, that's the way it was, as you say, for 800 years. It's inaccurate,
yeah.
very
Mm.
inaccurate.
At the same time, in the 1970s, when people are being properly oppressed, when you do have soldiers just breaking their
Yeah,
own laws, I understand that emotion that people are. So I'm not trying to like ignore that saying 800 years of British occupation. But I understand that. Well, I don't understand it, but I understand where they're coming from when they
sure.
scream like 800 years of British occupation. I'm sick of this. This needs to stop. I understand that feeling at the same time, like, but where you're coming from as well, Rachel, that we need to kind of tidy up, especially the 15th century. There's a new paper that's out as well that is applying that the likes of the O'Donnells were on the edge of trying to build an economic golden age, but were just slightly off by it. Now, the thing that's important to highlight there is that they were slightly off an economic golden age because of the amount of trade that was going on with Ireland and the wider world, which proves that Ireland was not isolated and cut off from the rest of the world that was going on.
Yeah, I mean, it's the archaeology, that they've done, that's unearthed like 14th and 15th century layers, shows
Mm,
it's absolutely 100%. When you've got silk cropping up in 14th and 15th century layers, that is
mm,
not indicative of an impoverished, isolated society, because Ireland did not have a silk weaving industry. So that
mm,
means that they're importing silk, which means it's ultra luxury and ultra expensive. So yeah, and the wills alone from places like Dublin and Wexford, and Waterford, show the kind of wealth that these people had. They had
mm,
lots of clothing, they had lots of goods. You have what ostensibly are middle class individuals bequeathing 20 or 30 sets of clothing to poor people, so that those poor people will then pray for them in and
mm,
new sets of clothing, not old clothes. I mean, commissioning, setting aside money to make clothes, shirts
mm,
and coats, tunics for these poor people, so that they will pray for them and to shorten their time in purgatory, of course.
Oh,
So that's not a sign of poverty. That's not a sign of isolation. That's, it's none of those things.
for sure. Just heading back over to the comment section again, you're mostly covering the early medieval period. And the thing is, once again, I think Rachel is right again, even when you're applying this logic back over to especially the early medieval period, when you're dealing with the collapse of the Roman Empire, what does Ireland do but go into both, first off, the golden age of the saints and scholars? We have, as you know yourself, St. Patrick who comes into the island. Then we have with St. Kieran, we have huge trade going all the way to the Byzantine Empire, which eventually leads one of the best examples of that connection of trade going from the the Byzantine Empire to Ireland to create this golden age,
Yeah.
of saints and scholars, is the Book of Kells.
Yeah.
Furthermore, we also have the likes of Saint Columbanus, who makes their way into Europe and travels all to Milan to write letters to the Pope. With that, we see Irish monastic settlements start to appear in the likes of Switzerland, which highlights the fact that this was a successful golden age of saints and scholars, where we see a high standard of literature, not just in Ireland, but starting to appear in Europe and into the likes of Charlemagne's court. Then from there, we go into another golden age, an economic golden age, where we see the mixing of both Hiberno, the Irish, and Scandinavians mixing in settlements such as Dublin, Cork, Waterford, and Limerick. As I've been ranting all week, that whole load of areas build up a trade network that go into the Silk Road, and then from the Silk Road go off to places like go off into China and tear into the greater, wider world. And we can see that then when we start to see silk, as Rachel has pointed out, silk starting to appear again in Dublin because of the trade from China, from the Byzantine Empire into Dublin during their, as Dr. Claire Donham has pointed out, an economic golden age.
Yeah.
So even if you're talking about the early medieval period, you're still seeing even better examples again. Now, the period we're trying to focus on trying to raise money for is the 15th century, in the period of the Wars of the Roses in Ireland. And that's also vitally important as well, because as we've pointed out from yesterday's live stream, is that we have a trade network, not just going into the likes of Scotland and up to Norway and stuff, but we also clearly seem to have a trade network that's very dominant going into the Iberian Peninsula. And as we pointed out, we're not, as Susan had pointed out yesterday, we're not just seeing that in the literature, Fitzgerald's literature, but we're also seeing that, as Rachel had pointed out yesterday, we can literally see that in the clothing. The clothing that the Irish are wearing seems to be heavily influenced from the Iberian Peninsula over to northern Italy, if I'm not mistaken.
I mean, you've got, certainly, there's definitely continental influences, for certain. So, Ireland is not this isolated, insular land of people wearing strange clothes, right? And even the chroniclers, we have foreigners who come to Ireland in the 14th and the 15th century. They make zero observations about how strange the clothes themselves are. The only observations are about the number of layers. Okay. So it's not about how the clothes look, it's about how many of the layers they're actually wearing, right? They're referred to as being naked, but we have to remember that the word naked does not mean the same thing in the 15th century. It doesn't. The word naked means incompletely dressed is what naked means. It doesn't mean that you're literally walking around in just your skin. So if that Catalan Viscount, Ramon de Pererios, who made his pilgrimage to St. Patrick's Purgatory, he observes about the court of King O'Neill, his own words, that the king and the queen and their ladies and his men, his henchmen, they would be his hengstmen, as they would be called in 15th century English, that they're all dressed, they are all naked. But then he goes on to describe all the clothes they're wearing. He says that the king and his men wear tunics down to their knees. The queen and the ladies have on kirtles. But what's clear is he doesn't think they're wearing enough. Like they need to have some overlayers on. And
mm,
he observes about them, some of them walking around barefoot. He does observe that. So in his mind, that counts as naked. They are not naked by our standards. So I think part of the
mm,
problem is modern people misinterpreting chronicles of the era by applying their modern understanding to terms. And also that ties in with bad translations, right? So we have
mm,
translators who understand maybe the basic language, the grammar and the syntax, but they don't understand the philosophy, the psychology of the medieval people who are writing these chronicles. And so when they interpret them, they're not interpreting them correctly. And that's the problem with translation, is there's always an element of interpretation.
mm.
And
Just
so
one second
sometimes,
there.
oh yeah,
Sorry there. Eamon, will you calm down there? What's it called? Big Brother's watching you, and you'll get pulled and chucked off of YouTube. Just make sure, just remember that. I understand what you're saying there, Eamon, but just watch what you're saying because you know that the Big Brother system is watching you.
yeah,
Sorry about that, Rachel.
yeah, no, yeah, you have to be careful about the words you
Yeah,
use on YouTube because you
yeah,
will
yeah,
get
yeah.
banned.
Mm. I'm not saying
And yeah,
myself and
so
Rachel don't
Kevin,
disagree with you, but yeah.
yeah, no, it's not about us, it's about the algorithm and the Big
Mm,
Brother watching, right? So Kevin has a good
yeah.
point. He said he thought naked had something to do with a lack of armor. I mean,
Mm,
same idea. So the word naked can be, when if it's applied to clothing, it's not enough clothing. If it's armor, it's not enough
mm,
armor. It doesn't mean that they're not dressed, right?
mm,
So yeah, that's the problem with the term naked, is that we see it crop up in criminal cases. I've quoted this case before, I'll quote it again. There is a case of abduction in England in the 15th century, and it states that the woman was abducted all naked. Okay, so then
mm.
everyone imagines that this poor woman was in her birthday suit, right? But then
Yeah.
it goes on in the same sentence, no punctuation, to say she was all naked, wearing naught but a smock and a kirtle. So she was wearing
Aye.
the linen shirt against her skin, and she was wearing the English equivalent of this gown. So she's
Mm,
not naked by our standards, she's naked by their standards. So when chroniclers from Europe go into Ireland and observe that people are naked, that is their perspective. To not be naked, you need to be wearing all the layers that are appropriate to your status, right?
mm,
And King O'Neill was a king according to, in the view of Ramon de Pererios, right? He's a king.
mm,
So kings should be wearing all the layers. They should be wearing the smock and a doublet and a gown and maybe a robe over top of that, right? They should have wonderful shoes and they should have hosen. And if any
mm.
of those layers are missing, then a foreign visitor is going to think, oh, well, he's naked, but
Yeah.
he's not by our
Mm.
standards. Yeah.
No,
But
no.
what's interesting about those chronicles is that none of them make observations about any strange details about the clothing. Like no one
Mm,
says, oh, the colors were alarming and garish, or the patterns were strange, like nothing I've ever seen before, or the
mm,
ornamentation was absolutely unseen of in any court that I have visited, right? There are no such observations.
mm,
So that's what leads me to believe that the silhouettes, the general shapes of the garments themselves, whatever they happen to be wearing, aren't that different.
mm. If you're wearing all those layers, I hope it's winter out. It is the winter, Jim. What are
Jim.
you trying to apply?
Yeah, so you all have to remember that the 15th century is the start of the Little Ice Age, and it's
Mm,
getting cold. Especially the further north you go, it's getting really cold. It's
mm,
snowing. The Thames is starting to freeze solid
mm,
for the winter. So it started, and I'm confident that probably the River Liffey, probably Shannon, right? I think all those rivers are probably freezing as well. So it's
yeah.
starting to get cold. And so people are wanting more and more layers. In the
Mm,
Scottish court in Edinburgh, we actually see suddenly women, the queen she has stomachers made. The piece that the panel that goes over top of the kirtle to hide the lacing, but her stomachers are lined in fur.
mm,
So not only is her gown lined in fur, but now the stomachers and James the Third's stomachers were also lined in fur. So it's getting
mm,
cold enough that they're starting to line any damn thing they can, including hats, in fur. So yeah,
mm.
it's cold, Jim. You want all those layers, you really do.
Sure.
Yeah.
Um,
So
just
yeah, so we're hoping to apply these learnings to this ensemble, and yeah, if you all would like to help us make this 15th century Irish noblemen's ensemble a reality, and would like to participate in the creation process, we're probably going to do some live Zoom sessions where,
mm,
say, people who've contributed to the GoFundMe will be participate in the Zoom, and you'll get to ask questions like face to face, and we'll get to interact on a real level while we're working on these garments. So yeah, there are perks for being a GoFundMe sponsor. We will, once we hit once we hit an amount that we can actually start, say, what we'd like to do, we're going to start from the skin out, everyone. We're going to start with
mm,
the what in 15th century English would have been called a smocka or a sherta, or a
mm.
lena in 15th century Irish. Once we hit the enough to actually purchase the linen and to cover the cost of me making it, then we'll go ahead and do that. And we'll start with the shirt. So we are going to start with this from the skin out. And this is going to be a lena as documentable to the 15th century. Do not expect a 16th century monstrosity with sleeves that you could use to drown a person, right?
Somebody not a fan of the 16th century?
No, it's not that. It's just that I think, I question the veracity of some of the sources that depict these men with sleeves that are big enough to be two separate tents, let alone one
Mm,
tent.
yeah,
And I also doubt the veracity of everyone, men and women, having worn that. So
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I do see it as you were saying earlier as well. I do see it as a kind of Iberian Peninsula influence into Ireland that pops in from the 16th century onwards
yeah.
rather than a 15th century. I think people have got this in their head that, I don't know. I don't know where people are getting it from and why some
Yeah,
people are getting over romanticized with it.
Yeah, and it's funny because if you look at the depictions of Irish men at arms from the 15th century, from the numerous effigies that have survived and tomb frontals, right, from everyone from a Karen to Irish knights, right,
Mm,
there's no big sleeves to be seen anywhere,
mm.
right? So
No, there's not.
it's just they're not there.
Yeah.
They are not documentable to that era, sadly.
No, no, they're not. Yeah, I would definitely 100% agree with that one. But the effigies also give away with the fact that you can see development because if you jump over to when we start to first see effigies with the crosses, like the crossover in Clonmacnoise and stuff, the clothing that's in there is early medieval clothing of the 10th century. And then
Yeah,
from there, especially when the Normans come in and they invade, they bring in their effigies, and you can see straight away, boom, the effigies fit in perfectly
yeah,
with the clothing of the 13th century, both women's clothing, and you can see them all in their armor and stuff. And also, you've got O'Connor's effigy as well, where he's actually in clothing of that big, massive, long tunic. But you can see the development of clothing going on there. And then as you go into the what was it called, the 14th century, and we see the reappearance again of people doing drawings and stuff, as you point out there with Art MacMorrough Cavanagh and stuff, that reappearing in the 14th century. And then as you go into the 15th century, you have that live stream we covered yesterday. And once again, still showing off that there's development there. And that, in fact, we were able to even home down to exactly the clothing that Seamus MacTiamád Fitzgerald, the 8th Earl of Desmond, was wearing. Geez, my tongue's all over the place. But
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
I,
like,
I, I would say exact is maybe too strong a statement, but clothing that is likely to have been
mm,
something he would have worn, because we don't have any
yeah.
depictions of him as far as I know, right? There's no portraits, there's no illuminated manuscripts that depict him in life, right? Anything is posthumous. So
Mm,
yeah, I wouldn't say we
'cause-
have exactly what he wore.
mm,
We've narrowed it down to very likely items he could have worn based on
mm,
the evidence. Yeah. I
mm.
don't I don't want to oversell this. Now,
Come on, we
if
need the
any
money.
of you if any of you know of any 15th century portraiture from
Mm,
Ireland, let us know, because that would be
This is Black
thrilling
and
and
red.
exciting. But
Mm,
unfortunately, I suspect that the iconoclasm that the Puritans undertook in the 17th century probably did away with most anything, because most portraits would have been part of altarpieces, right? And altarpieces would have been viewed as evil papistry. So they
mm,
probably would have been set on fire. Yeah.
maybe. Well, actually, I wonder if there's any way to get in contact with the actual, because the Desmond family are still there today. So I wonder if there's any way to get in contact with them. Susan, are you talking about the source of Richard III sending those gifts over to our man Seamus MacTomod? James the Eighth Earl of Desmond.
Yes, that
James
was that
Fitzgerald.
was that was that was yeah, that was a gift. Yeah. That was an attempt. So some people, we talked about that yesterday, and some people, a lot of people want to view it as some kind of bribery, some kind of, it's, or some sort of coercive act on the part of the English king to get this Irish earl to dress more Englishly. But as I pointed out to you, it was just extremely common for
Oh,
kings to gift expensive suits of clothing to people in their sphere of influence, or to people whom they would like to be in their sphere of influence. Not as a cultural imposition, but as a, I'm giving you something that is worth, by modern counts, millions of dollars. Enjoy,
mm,
right?
mm, mm,
So it's less about cultural imperialism, if not at all in the 15th century, and
mm,
more about, I would like you to be part of my court. I would like you to be one of my allies. I would like your support, right? Richard
mm,
III acknowledged that he needed support. He's just claimed the throne in a somewhat unpopular fashion. Like,
mm,
his, not everyone is actually on board with him just usurping the throne from Edward V, as would have been. So he's going to need support, and he recognizes that he's going to need support from outside of England as much as inside of England. And so
that's very
this
true.
is probably just a way for him to curry favor and support with this very powerful and influential Irish earl, right?
Mm, mm,
So
mm.
I'm viewing it from that lens, rather than evil Richard III is trying to, manipulate his way and get, as you put it, is getting him to dress nicely to go into the Irish Parliament. I don't think so. I
Mm.
don't think that's what it was about at all.
It's funny because of the fact that it was what was it called? Oh my God, Seamus's is it his father? Kevin will probably correct me on this one. I think it's either his father or his brother was killed by oh my God, what's his name again? He was executed only a few was a year or so beforehand, just say, and that Desmond was actually sort of in open revolt against the English at the time. But it is a very funny relationship because of the fact at this point it was first off, it was no longer Edward who was in power; it was Richard, and on top of that as well, it's the relationship they would have had with the Woodvilles and stuff. Because the
Right.
Desmonds have a very bad relationship with the Woodvilles. The Woodvilles and the Fitzgeralds do not get along, although the Woodvilles are in bed with the Yorkists. But I don't think they're in bed at this time with Richard III, and I think that's why, as you said
Yeah,
there,
no, they're not. They
yeah,
are they are definitely not. So the Woodvilles
yeah,
have fallen out of favor, right?
yeah,
Because the Woodvilles, that was Elizabeth and her family, her massive, massive family. And
mm,
when she becomes queen, she basically, she does what everyone in the history of kingship has done, or queenship has done. She secures favorable positions in marriages for her family. The
mm,
problem is, her family is viewed as being commoner.
mm,
She's viewed as being a commoner, and so it's considered, she pisses off so many of the English royal peers, and the more powerful noble families of England, by giving all of these positions and lands and fiefdoms and properties to her family, and arranging powerful marriages with her family. They really view her as being an upstart in the original sense of that word. So yeah,
mm,
by when Richard III takes over, there's actually one of the reasons I suspect that he was able to do that is because he wasn't attached to the Woodvilles.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah,
Um,
I'm
yeah,
pretty
so
certain that was part of it.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there. Just to keep everyone ahead there, is that what's happened is that this is the year 1468, where John Tiptoft, the first Earl of Winchester, has accused Thomas Fitzgerald, the seventh Earl of Desmond, of breaking the statutes of Kilkenny and committing treason against the king because he has allied himself with the Irish against the king's subjects, okay, which is complicated in itself. So he actually has both Thomas Fitzgerald, the seventh Earl, arrested, and he has I literally was looking at it. Where is it gone? Yeah. Another fella called Thomas Fitzgerald, the seventh Earl of Kildare. So there's two Thomases at once.
Wow.
Normally, when that happens,
that's
I
that's
just
not
switch over.
confusing at all.
It's very bad. That's why I started calling James the Eighth Earl Seamus, because there was just too many
Too many
James.
Jameses. Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
yeah, yeah.
seriously.
Yeah. So I just started calling him James MacTomod and just kept to the Irish name, which you can easily say Mac Thomas as well if you wanted to, but we'll keep over to the MacTomod. So he gets executed, and then is it what is he worth? Is yeah, so it's his son. His son then takes over, which is the eighth Earl, which we're referring to as he's called in the Annals of the Four Masters, James Fitzgerald, the Earl of Desmond, to stop confusion because there's so many James Fitzgeralds kicking around at the same time. I'm just calling him, as he's called in the Annals of the Four Masters, Seamus, what's his name? MacTomod, the Eighth Earl, just to make it
Right.
easier.
Right. So we have a good question here. Were king's clothing handed down? This kind of feels like a silly question. It is absolutely not a silly question. King's clothing, yes. So the clothing of royalty, we know what happens to it because we actually have the wills of kings and queens from all across the 15th century, all across Europe. So we
Mm,
know that they very often bequeath their clothing to their servants. So handed
mm,
down is maybe not the right term because that feels like, oh, just sort of passing it down. No, no, no. It was bequeathed to
mm,
servants. And often it was a way, it wasn't expected that the servants would necessarily wear it. In fact, if it violated the sumptuary laws, they wouldn't. But those
oh,
servants
yeah.
could sell it and get money from it,
Mm,
right? They could sell, and
yes.
because those garments could be picked apart and sold for
Mm,
parts, like cars are chopped now in a chop shop, garments could undergo a similar chop process, and then the materials would be sold to be reused, or they could be sold in a secondhand market. But I'm kind of pretty much feeling that the king's garments didn't end up on the secondhand market like other people's
mm,
did. So yeah, absolutely. Kings would pass down their garments to their loyal servants. Queens would do the same thing. And we know that they weren't necessarily intended for wear because queens will bequeath their gowns to their favorite male servants. So it's
mm,
very clear he's not going to be wearing it. He's
yeah.
either going to give it to his wife or his sister or his mother or his daughter, or he's going to sell it for parts and make money from it. So yeah, they
Mm,
did absolutely 100%, which can make the dating of garments really tricky because all throughout the Middle Ages, garments get recycled and reused. So
mm,
we can carbon date a garment, but then if you're like, well, we think this belonged to Margaret III of Denmark, but it dates to the 13th century. You're like, well, yeah, because the fabric dates to the 13th century, but it was recycled or upcycled for her use in her life. So
mm,
it can get really tricky to date garments for that reason. And we actually have garments from uh, Denmark, not Denmark, Denmark's property, Greenland. We have garments from
mm,
Greenland that come from 15th century graves, but the fabric, Philip, the fabric dates to the 13th century in some cases.
mm.
So they were so desperate and short on resources at the ass end of the world in Greenland in the 15th century that they were recycling garments that were 100 or 200 years old for wear.
It's wild. Mm.
Yeah. So it
Oh,
makes it hard. It can make it hard to date a garment for that reason.
mm, yeah. And
Oh,
proper
oh,
ignorance. Go on.
Oh, I just
Oh,
saw
cool
Cool
cat.
Cat. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool Cat, that's fun. I'm honestly, everyone, I understand. We understand. Philip and I understand
Mm,
that finances are tight. They're tight for us too. We don't make a lot of money from this content thing. Um,
mm,
and so we're really honored, deeply
mm,
honored when you all entrust us with your hard-earned money to be able to create this medieval beauty for you. So thank you so
mm.
much, Cool Cat. That's fantastic.
Aye. Oh yeah, thank you so much, Cool Cat. I just wanted to put the little thank you in there because the fact that you were on a roll and I didn't want to
But yeah,
shut you
yeah.
up there. So I was like, I'll just type that into the comment
No,
section.
great. Appreciate it. And there's more thank you is better. So fantastic.
Oh, of
Jim
course.
says, how about the king's crown? Was it handed down or did they make a new crown for every king? They did not make a new crown for every king.
Mm,
They were handed down generally. But eventually, and this is another part of the problem, is that
mm,
eventually a king or queen might decide, well, this crown is a little old fashioned. And so
mm.
then they would melt it, have it melted down, and they would make it into a new one. This is
Ah,
also one of the reasons that we don't have very many medieval royal jewels. We
okay,
don't
that makes sense.
mo
Yeah.
yeah, most of the regalia we have that has survived is accidental.
Okay.
Um, because, do you remember that Polish hoard of royal
I
regalia that they
was
found?
just thinking that. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So, the in the cathedral in the cathedral floor in Poland,
Mm,
they
mm,
found this hoard that had probably been sealed up in the 16th century of
mm.
royal regalia from medieval Poland. So now they
Yeah.
know what it looked like, but that's only because someone forgot about it.
Yeah. Because most of the time, aren't we just going off of pictures and drawings and effigies and stuff of
Yeah.
crowns? The problem, this is the thing as well, is when a historian just goes over and dismisses it because we have drawings of the 10th century in Ireland with Irish kings depicted with crowns. But then, if you give it to an Irish historian these days, well, an Irish academic right now, they're turning around and claiming, because it's part of their argumented agenda, that the Irish did not have crowns in the 10th century. So they're just outright dismissing it. Although all of the what was it, the kings that are in this drawing, because it's an invasion, it's the Battle of Bamborough. It's the Battle of Bamborough, and there's a load of Irish kings and stuff in that battle, but they're all depicted having crowns on their head. But then when the Irish historians are looking at it, they're just like, oh no, there's no like written evidence of any crown existing at that point. But I don't know. I do question that as well. I don't know. I don't know. I'd have to look more into it.
I mean, art is tricky, right? You and I've
Yeah.
had this conversation. Art is
Mm,
tricky. Who did the art? Who did the illumination?
I
Did they
see.
have an
That's the problem.
agenda? Were they from Ireland or were they from somewhere else where crowns were a
Mm,
standard part of kingship, right? So
yeah.
yeah, you have to be very art is dangerous. Everyone, I would
Mm,
just like to emphasize how dangerous art is. You have to understand the context and when the art in which the art was created, who created it, for whom they created it, and what story is the art depicting, right?
mm,
Is that depicting a story that happened in the lifetime of the chronicler, or is that depicting an episode from history that happened centuries before? So yeah,
mm.
you have to be really careful with art. It's tricky. It's yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't
Oh,
I
big
don't
time.
necessarily disagree with modern historians who say, well, they didn't have crowns, because then that makes us look, well, what is the evidence other than this
Mm,
art? What is
yeah.
the evidence of crowns? Yeah.
Mm. Was makeup a thing in medieval Ireland? I wouldn't say it was medieval Ireland we were wearing any makeup, unless Rachel wants to say otherwise. But there's always a theory that perhaps we had, we're putting stuff into our face to kind of highlight our face and stuff during the Iron Age Ireland and perhaps during the Bronze Age as well. That
So
we
I would
most likely put various bits and bobs in our face.
I would say that in the 15th century, noble women are using the same kind of cosmetics in Ireland that other women are using in the rest of Europe, right? That's
Mm,
because the aesthetic is the same that they're going for. Now, was it makeup like we understand makeup? No, there were no smoky eyes.
mm,
There was no process of enlarging your lips, by using lip liner and filling in that space, right? But probably I would bet you dollars to donuts that medieval Irish noblewomen in the 15th century especially had access to the same kinds of lead-based creams that they could smooth onto their face to smooth their complexions if there were any
Mm,
imperfections. They probably had access to a kind of lip rouge made from kermes or other red insects that they could use to just make their lips a little bit more red and put a little bit of
mm,
color in their cheeks, right? Kohl to actually highlight their eyebrows a little bit. Yeah, I'm pretty certain that if I start digging, I'm going to find that
very
Irish
quickly.
noblewomen in the 15th century were doing the same thing.
Very quickly,
Because,
because
yeah,
the fact is that especially the Anglo-Irish women would have had to go to English court and French court, so you're going to find that very fast, in my opinion.
yeah,
Yeah, very
yeah.
very
Uh,
quickly.
so Jim makes an interesting comment. You talked me out of ever going to any art gallery, Rachel. No, no, no. That was the wrong takeaway, Jim. No, bad boy, no biscuit. The right takeaway should be that you should look at art as a puzzle to be solved, right?
Mm,
When I go to an art gallery and I'm looking at historical art, I'm looking for all the fun little hidden or not so hidden bits of symbolism that are contained in that painting, right? I'm looking for the clues as to who that figure is. Is that a saint? Is that a martyr? Is it an ancient Roman god? Is it
mm,
is it a Caesar, right? So look at historical medieval art and Renaissance art as a puzzle to be
mm,
solved and divined and interpreted, rather than just taking it as a piece of art that's as something that should just make your wall look prettier, right? That's my point. You should look at art as being a three-dimensional work, not just as
mm.
this two-dimensional piece of decoration. Yeah.
Someone's getting excited there in the comment section.
I guess so. My
Um, as
goodness.
I was saying there, just be careful lads what you post up because you don't want to get bounced out by YouTube. Um, makes me wonder if Irish noble women felt insecure without makeup. I suppose it's like everyone else. You know, you always need to get dressed up, dolled up, especially if you're going. I don't think people would care too much if they were just hanging around their local area and stuff. But if you're going to places like Dublin to the Irish Parliament, or if you're going over to likes of London and stuff, I think you might feel insecure. I think Rachel definitely would answer that better than me. Like,
Well, so the more the more images to which people are subjected of perfect beauty, the more likely people are to be insecure about their own.
yeah, mm,
Um, and so we know that going back, to the Roman Empire, men and women were looking for ways to enhance their beauty, their looks,
mm,
their appearance to align with whatever the ideal of the time was.
yeah,
So I'm confident that women of all classes were probably just as insecure about their looks as we are today, just maybe not quite as deeply ingrained because they weren't inundated as heavily with
mm,
imagery of the perfect person, right? We talked earlier about the Instagram filter. Medieval painting being automatically coming with an Instagram filter, basically.
mm,
Automatically people are perfected, their imperfections are downplayed, they're beautified to be an ideal version of themselves when you see people depicted in portraits.
mm.
So yeah, that could be a little disheartening if every portrait you look at is like, oh, she's so perfect, or oh, he's so perfect. And then you look in your polished bronze mirror and you're like, that's not me. But
Yeah,
you're not being inundated the way we are 1,000 times an hour with images of now AI perfected figures. So it would
mm,
have been less intense, but I think there would have been just enough to make people
yeah.
want to try harder.
Yeah, 100%. I definitely agree with that one because even if you were to turn around and says, yeah, but it's sort of a sin to kind of love yourself that much, but at the same time, I think it's only natural, isn't it?
It,
Though,
it, it is.
especially to compare yourself to others. Like,
I mean, it's a biological imperative, right? Part of our biology is we are attracted to people who look good and are pretty and handsome because that is a trigger to our biological selves that their DNA must also therefore be good and worthy
mm,
of reproduction, right? So that's
yeah,
something we have to fight hard because it is programmed into our biology.
mm,
That being said, what you said, was it you said something about the moral being to be modest and pure. We know
yes,
that
yeah,
that may have been the ideal, but it was absolutely not adhered to in any way because there's every century
Mm,
Every century has sermons documented that complain about men and women putting too much effort into their looks, about focusing too much on the rotten sack of flesh that is their human form, right?
mm,
They're working to turn themselves into something they're not. And so if preachers are complaining about it, it's happening a lot.
mm,
So
for
yeah.
sure. Like,
I and in San Bernardino in Italy in the early 15th century becomes really popular as a preacher, even though he's preaching these really fiery sermons that often are targeted at women and how they dress and how they do their hair. So
mm,
we know how women were dressing and doing their hair because San
mm,
Bernardino whines about it all the damn time, like all the time. And
mm.
so yeah, they were makeup, hair, clothing, big focus on all of that.
Oh, chalk it down. Like, and just need to build that time machine. Yeah, I'm the same boat as well. But I'd love to be invisible, to be honest with you, because I think two problems would come in. First off, I
Yeah.
can't speak Middle Irish. If I was to go back to the 15th century, I wouldn't be able to speak Middle Irish to be able to communicate myself. Plus, I think the problem is now Rachel could definitely correct me on this one as well. Is how correct are linguistics when it comes down to the way people their body language of communication and also the way they pronounce words as well. How correct are linguistics when it comes down to the 15th century languages? Are we still just guessing or what?
I mean, we have theories, right? There's the way that linguists, paleolinguists,
Mm,
reconstruct past the way languages sounded in the past is one looking for poems
mm,
that have rhyme schemes, and then you can
yeah.
at least kind of get an idea. Well, these sounds should go together, so these sounds must be similar.
Mm,
And then when you get a bigger map of different kinds of sounds that are paired up as being rhyming, then you can try to reconstruct. And
mm,
sometimes we also then get phonetic spellings of different words, or the same word with like 14 different phonetic spellings. And then you can try to use those combined phonetic spellings to come at the truth of how the word may have sounded. But the reality is that it's all theoretical, right? It's no
mm,
matter what, until we get that time machine, it will be theoretical. So
for
and
sure,
and
for
like
sure.
like you, I would like a time machine, but I want the window time machine with sound.
Yes. Yeah, 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 yeah. And just peek out at them because first off trying to communicate would be a problem, and even if, as you said there, we managed to master a way to communicate and have that body language bang on as well. The problem then would be, would you want to communicate with these people? Are these two people too
Yeah,
aggressive? Like their emotions, what's their emotions like? Is it a case of their emotions going up and down and up and down? Like if you have somebody who is 1 minute very jolly, very happy, and then suddenly they're screaming, shouting, running around and stuff. Would you want to communicate with somebody like that, especially if they become very threatening very fast? You know,
yeah,
mm. So yeah, I want to look through the window and just peek and say
yeah. I want
hello.
for me, it's the microbiota, it's the microbes that I fear.
Yeah,
Right? I know that you and I are alive because our ancestors survived the Black Death. So I'm not
yes,
necessarily so concerned about bubonic plague, but
mm.
there's so many other microbes that could possibly infect us and kill us, to which we no longer have immunity.
Yeah,
And and there's of course the random violence that, while technically against the law in most places, was
yeah.
still committed on a fairly regular basis. And
Oh,
I don't
big time.
just not interested. We
Yeah.
live, despite everything, we do in many ways live in a more peaceful time.
Mm.
So, you know,
Because I was
yeah,
even reading this morning, and I think you've come across a few stories before of people waiting outside the bar. Now, don't get me wrong, it still happens today, but I don't think it's as violent as it was during the medieval period because I've come across some stories, and okay, so yeah, it still sort of happens, like, but there's a good few stories of people just waiting outside a bar and then suddenly, or tavern, and as the person's coming out, them just going over and killing them. Um,
yeah,
I've come across a good few of those stories. Now, granted, I'm sure somebody will come up with a few examples of it happening probably yesterday, but I think it's much more rare today than it was in the medieval period of people, not taking a certain comment while drinking, okay, and then just suddenly waiting outside for them and hacking them up as they're leaving. I think it's more common during the medieval period.
Right. No, I agree 100%. Yeah.
Mm,
It's not, yeah, as bad as things might seem, it's just not the same.
mm,
And yeah, there's a lot of reasons that I agree with Shellback Bow actually, who
mm,
just commented that he wants an invisible drone that can kind of hop there, has live stream capabilities and sound.
mm,
Right. That would be my goal. I enjoy recreating the beautiful aspects of medieval culture and society. I am not interested in experiencing the worst aspects of medieval culture and society. And unfortunately, a time machine would let you do that. And
mm.
did you read the novel Timeline by Michael
No, I
Crichton?
haven't. No.
You should read it. It's set in the 15th century, actually, in the Hundred
Oh,
Years'
but
War.
oh,
They
nice.
made a terrible, terrible movie from it. Some of you
I
asked
think I
me
might
about
have seen. Yeah.
the movie is hideous. It is
Yes.
a pale shadow compared to the novel. The novel
Mm,
is excellent and it
mm.
presents a lot of really good ideas, also a lot of warning labels about science
Got
and
it.
technology and its application.
Mm,
Um, and in the original novel, there's a 15th century reenactor, French reenactor, who is
mm,
kind of like the male version of me. Like he does it all. He's trained in 15th century martial arts. He's a bowman. He's got all the right clothes. He can speak 15th century French, right?
mm.
And so he ends up going back in time for reasons that I'm not going to go into here. But in the movie, they turn him into Gerard Butler. And so suddenly he's an ignorant Scotsman who has no idea about medieval life. He's not a reenactor, he's not a living historian, and they send him back instead. And I'm like, this is not the same novel at all.
Yeah. Yeah, they get a bit too excited sometimes with those movies and stuff.
Yeah.
Thanks for Rachel. Just got a donation there
Oh,
of
oh,
£1.
oh, wow. Thank you to whomever that. Oh, wait, let me go back. Oh, Jets klar. Oh,
Mm,
ist das ja jetzt klar? Sind Sie ja Deutsch?
mm.
Because that might be German, which would mean now it's obvious, or now it's clear.
Who's getting the super chat? Somebody else give a super chat as well. 1 second, because I apologize for this because of the fact that there's a question there for Rachel.
Oh, yeah.
I need to ask this: why do you suppose medieval filmmakers don't consult folks such as Creative Contessa in order to keep the outfits historically accurate?
They
That's a good
do.
question for you.
they, they do, and that's the worst part. Shellback Bow, I'm sorry, I got so exhausted yesterday after working because after the live stream, I went and taught 3 hours of English, and I
Mm,
was just dead. So I didn't make a post yesterday. I'm going to make a community post, everyone, with the GoFundMe link for our 15th century Irish clothing making project.
mm,
But the
mm,
question about historically accurate clothing, so often
mm,
historical costumers are consulted. Often, fashion historians, experts in medieval material culture are consulted, but the answers they deliver are not the answers that are wanted.
mm.
So here's the problem: is that directors, producers have a vision of what the medieval world was, and that
Yeah.
vision is dark and gritty and dirty
Mm,
and raw and violent and dangerous and muddy, very muddy,
mm,
lots of mud all day, no sunshine, always winter. Right? That's their idea of the medieval world. And if any fashion historian comes along and corrects that misconception, they're thanked, they're paid, and all suggestions are dismissed.
yeah.
So that's why. It's because everyone now believes, since basically starting with Excalibur, and someone actually had a really explained this, it gave it even more explanation than I already had. Back in the 80s, the early 80s, late
Mm,
70s, early 80s, there was a trend towards dark fantasy movies.
yeah.
Excalibur was one of them. And that dark fantasy world made everyone think, oh, well, that's the medieval world. Also thinking of
Mm,
Willow, right? Same idea, this dark fantasy world. And that just got applied also, therefore, to the medieval world. And so people stopped believing that the brightly colored world of Errol Flynn's Robin Hood was actually
Mm.
medieval. And instead, everyone was like, oh, that can't be real. That's got to be Hollywood fantasy. Everyone must have been filthy and dirty, and no one had colored clothes, and everyone wore rags, and people just liked having mud on their face all the time. So that's why, because the idea is that this is what the audience wants. The audience wants a gritty, dark, medieval world with no color and mud all the time, which is not
Mm.
true. It's just not true. A Knight's Tale, Philip, have you seen A Knight's Tale?
Yes, of course I have. I think everyone at this point has.
Right. Is it dark and wet
It is
and
to a
muddy?
certain degree. Yeah, yeah, it is, isn't it? And it's
No,
meant
but
to be
it
an
but it
upbeat
but it
movie.
it's you know it's actually not. It doesn't have that terrible blue filter applied to it, that
Yeah,
blue
that's
grading,
true.
right? It's
Yeah.
actually bright and colorful, and the clothing
Mm.
is not accurate. I'm never going to say that, but we've proven that you can make a bright medieval movie and people will watch it and like it.
Yes. Yeah. That's a very true. It's a fact. But look how successful. Now, don't get me wrong. You've torn it apart a dozen times, but at the same time, it's most historical thing going these days, and that was very successful as well. Well, is Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. I thought that was quite good. Obviously, you could easily tear it apart again, but it has proven that that way forward does work perfectly fine. That doesn't need to be dark, gritty, and horrible. Don't get me wrong,
Right.
the actions alone, the actions alone are bloody gritty in that game because two fellas would be in a pub in that video game talking away to each other. Everything's bright, everything's charming. Someone will come over with a pole arm suddenly, and I didn't. It wasn't until I was watching an ad for it, and I saw two lads in a pub drinking away. And one fella went up to the other guy, a random person came up to two lads who were drinking, shoved a pole arm into his head suddenly. That my brain suddenly went, that game's a gritty game. That's a horrible, gritty game. But I sometimes I can understand where directors are coming from. Where okay, sometimes you need to make it gritty, but then it comes into a thing of every single game. Every single video game, every
Yeah.
single movie needs to be dark
Yeah.
and gritty. It's like you do realize people lived in this era.
Right.
Mm,
People are people. We like bright things. We like colorful things. We can be socialized out of it. For instance, in Korea, they've been socialized out of wearing colors.
mm,
But it's because they believe that if you dress like I do, they like
mm.
it. They actually like seeing people like me. I wear this outside all the time here in Korea, out and about
Yeah,
all the time, and they
yeah,
love it. That I hear,
mm,
oh my God, so beautiful in Korean. 아이고 예쁘다, right? All the time. 아름답다,
mm,
all the time. But they don't want to wear it themselves because they're worried about sticking out, about
mm,
standing out. They don't want to stand out from the community. They want to be together and
mm,
not feel like they are any more conspicuous than anyone else. That's why in Korea everyone wears beige and white and black and brown because they're
mm,
neutral colors. They don't draw attention. Doesn't mean that they like colors any less. They just want to see other people wearing them.
mm,
So yeah, humans, we're peacocks. We want color. We want beauty. We don't want to be wearing mud on our skin all the time.
mm.
So yeah, but the reason why is because one, directors these days have a certain vision, misconception of what the Middle Ages was, how it looked.
Yeah. Mm,
And two, they're trying to manipulate the audience psychologically, right? To
mm,
make them come into this movie with a sense of foreboding, sitting on the bleeding edge of an anxiety attack, right? That's going to
mm.
engage the audience and make them buy into it emotionally instead of just bringing
Yeah.
them something pretty and joyful, I guess.
Mm, mm, mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, like but even that other Robin Hood. There's a Robin Hood movie that you linked me to the other day, and I seen that, and it's the same bleak. Like the
Death
background
of
was just
Robin Hood with Hugh Jackman. Yeah.
yeah. Like first off, the background, no trees. It's all just dead space in the background, right?
Yeah.
Then he's wearing this big gray furry kind of what was it kind of ape monkey outfit that he had on big furry massive thing like he looked like somebody who just came out of the jungles or something. I don't know, just wearing the ape itself on him. And I was looking at, and it's all gray and dark, and I was like, that's not the Robin Hood movie I want to watch. I want to. Do
Right,
you remember the team, the feeling of Robin Hood back in 1993? That's the kind of when people say Robin Hood, that's what I want to see. Big, cheery, bunch of fellas in the forest singing their hearts out, having the banter, having a laugh. We just stole from the rich to give to the poor. That's the happy, jolly feeling I want to have. And yet these days, especially after the 2000 onwards, it's just being gritty this and gritty that. It's like, can we have somebody who lives in that positive feeling of living in the medieval era that you see and feel when you read literature and stuff of the ups, especially
right,
since we're going into another period again of what was it, recessions and bloody crime rate going up and this and that. I want to go to the cinema to zone out and enjoy the bloody movie, especially a Robin
right.
Hood movie.
I
Yeah.
don't want the medieval version of my modern life.
Yes.
I want I want not my modern life. I don't want the horrible feelings. I don't want to feel anxious and depressed. I want to immerse myself in a beautiful world that takes me out of this horror that we're currently experiencing. Yeah,
Mm.
100%. Um, Twitchy Witch commented that she really likes my outfit today. Thank you, Twitchy. I would just like to point out that the stripes on this, for those of you who care about
Mm.
authenticity, the stripes are not right for 1480 Florence. They are not.
Oh,
Stripes were
what?
worn. I'm sorry, everyone. They're not right for Florence in any era, as far as I can tell. They were worn in Milano, in Milan, in the court of Milan at the end of the 15th century. But
Mm.
back when I made this 25 years ago, I didn't know that. And the fabric was
Ah,
$1 a yard, and I was a poor student. So I
yeah.
will continue to wear it for things like these live streams. But if I were going to an actual reenactment event with actual standards,
Mm.
I wouldn't wear it.
Mm.
Yeah. But thank you anyway. It is a beautiful dress. I love it, and it fits very comfortably. And it's great that it still fits me after 25 years.
Mm. There's a question
um,
I have for you. What's the
yeah.
most historically accurate show you would go to, and what's the when you just want to go to a show that's chilled out? What's the least historically accurate one you'd go to? So, what's the most, and what's the least one you go to?
That I've seen, so I mean, I have to say what I've seen, and let me be clear that I generally avoid medieval movies and shows because I don't want to be disappointed.
Mm.
Um, so I haven't maybe seen as many of our audience has, but I would
Mm.
say that some of the most authentic ones that I've seen haven't been historical pieces. The
Mm.
Princess Bride has fantastic colors and has many accurate silhouettes. Like
Mm.
Prince Humperdinck looks like a 15th century prince in his ensemble, right? He's got a gown with proper pleats and big
Mm.
padded shoulders, and he's wearing hosen that show his legs, right? She is often wearing houppelande like gowns also, right? And her
Mm.
hair is down often because she's a maid and she's unmarried. She's an unmarried princess. They've made her into a princess, right? But eventually, when she gets married, she'll probably put her hair up, right? And everything is colorful, and people aren't all dirty. I mean, there's some people who are dirty, like people who should be. So, yeah, The Princess Bride is actually pretty damned good.
Mm.
And Ever After, the movie Ever After. Have you seen the movie Ever After with Drew Barrymore and
I
Angelica
think
Houston?
I did. Can you remind me about that one? I probably did
It's a
watch it.
retelling, it's a historical retelling of the Cinderella story. So it's set
No, I
in
don't think I
early
have.
16th century France. Oh, go check it out. Watch it with Yuki, Ever
Mm.
After.
Yeah.
Um, it is fantastic. Drew Barrymore plays, she plays Cinderella basically, but it's set in in the court of Francis I. And it's, Leonardo da Vinci is there. They're in Chambord, so they're in the Loire Valley. And everyone is wearing, except for the men, the women are
Mm.
all wearing clothes that are very, very accurate, relatively accurate representations of late 15th or early 16th century clothing.
Mm.
And you have different classes represented, and the servants aren't just wearing rags, at least not until
Mm.
the family gets poor, and then they're wearing rags for obvious reasons, right?
Mm.
So Ever After, it's actually set in French Renaissance palaces, which is nice.
Mm.
And it's colorful, and the clothes are pretty good. They're pretty good. Yeah.
Sounds like a movie I'd actually love, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
Jim,
and
you're getting a bit too far there now. YouTube will kick you out.
it's got swashbuckling and daring do, and Drew Barrymore saves herself at the end.
Mm,
So I think it's fantastic. The story is fantastic. It's witty. It's interesting. They discuss Thomas More's Utopia, for instance.
mm,
So they're actually, there's it's deep. It's a deeper movie than you're expecting it to be.
mm,
So yeah, Ever After is one of my recommendations if you want to see people wearing relatively authentic historical garments. Now, whether you
mm,
count that as medieval or not, there's debate about, well, is the 15th century medieval? Is the 16th century still medieval? Or is that Renaissance? Or is it the modern era? I don't, I'm not going to fight that fight right now, but it's one of my favorite movies for 15th and early 16th century clothing.
mm. Awesome. For me, I think the most historical one I'd go for sure is probably, and the one that you were bitching about from the stills is actually Outlaw King. I'd love, the Scottish War of Independence with the Bruce. And I know you were
Yeah,
bitching about that one, but I like that one.
yeah. No, it's
I
terrible.
think
The clothes are terrible. The
really.
clothes are all terrible.
Uh,
There are no early 14th century clothes to be seen that I
mm,
could see in the stills. Again, I
yeah.
haven't watched the movie because the stills made me not want to watch the movie.
The movie's
But yeah,
awesome. I love it.
it's and the armor is it's not early, mostly not early 14th century armor, and yeah, the hair, and no, it's just bad. There is some
Mm,
color, I will grant you.
yeah,
There are people actually in clothes with color, and it isn't all graded to depressing blue, as I recall from the
yeah, it's
still.
not.
And there wasn't as much mud as as that to which we become accustomed in the modern world, but it didn't make me want to watch it at all,
Mm.
sadly.
What I really loved about that movie as well is there's a period. So as you know yourself, what's it called? Robert the Bruce ends up marrying is Elizabeth de Burgh, and she's in the background and she's just doing daily life. Like I love his style of the director's style of directing in that one because he purposely wanted to show, hey, look, life goes on. So there's scenes where, for example, he's having really important meetings and you can see Isabel de Bruce playing with the children in the background. And I fell in love with those scenes in that movie. There's also other ones as well where you have Edward Longshanks in the very start of the movie. He is literally being a complete tyrant. And then suddenly, because, he must have had, he's definitely portrayed as having kind of like, and it's done really, really well, by the way, having, what's it called? When you switch for suddenly being very angry to being very kind of calm and relaxed.
Mood swings?
Mood swings, yes.
Yeah.
He's portrayed as very mood swingish in the movie. But regardless, which is always handy for being a king, but regardless, while he's having that kind of tantrum, fist hitting the throne and stuff, you'll see people in the background just sipping on wine, having casual conversations and stuff. And I love those bits and bobs in that movie. That's one of my favorite things. And the director purposely had that. He would just get the camera and he would have everybody set up and everybody would continue acting and doing their bits and bobs. He had people doing their trades. Like he got living historians in the background doing their trade, doing their fishing, sending their products while you'd have the main focus going on at the same time. And so I love that movie. And he literally picked up the camera and moved with the actors. So as the camera was going around, it would show. So the people, even if the camera wasn't pointing at people, they were still supposed to be in character, continuing to do their job, doing their bits and bobs as the camera moved around. And God, I loved it so much. That's what I like about Outlander King the most.
Yeah, I wish then they had paid attention to the clothing of the main actors then. And actually not just
Oh,
paid attention to it, but portrayed it accurately. That would
yeah.
have been perfect, but he ruined it by not doing that. And I mean, so most people, I know that especially you being Irish, you view
Mm.
Edward the First as nothing but a tyrant, but he was
Yes.
madly in love with his queen, right?
Mm.
He was
Oh, he was.
devoted to her. And when
Mm.
she died, it had a massive impact on him.
Yes, it did.
right? There's a difference in the before and after
Mm.
the death of his queen, right? And that's why he left all of those memorials all over
Yes.
England and Scotland.
He did. He did. He did. Yeah, I remember that because that was the book. What was it? The Great and Terrible King, Edward the First. That book. I
Yeah.
remember reading that because I really struggled with reading when I was in secondary school. So I actually had to teach myself how to read because, oh God, teachers are brilliant. But regardless, what I did was I started teaching myself to read, and one of the first books I read was actually Longshanks' Great and Terrible King. And yeah, you're perfectly right. He's such an interesting character. Um, and it is interesting because he has that period where he's very, 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 very violent. And you can see that by the way he takes that outburst on,
Mm.
what's his name, during the Second Baron's Revolt. He gets a hold of the spelling is literally in my head and I'm not pronouncing it. It's the leader of the Baron's Revolt, and he chops him up. It is Simon de Montfort. He gets Simon de Montfort.
Montfort. Simon de Montfort?
Montfort. Yes,
Yeah,
that's the one. That's
yeah,
the one. That's the one.
yeah.
And he gets a
Nothing
hold of
like
him and chops
drawing
him
and
up.
quartering to get the day started. Yeah.
I know, right? But which do okay, right. This is one. Which account have you come across? Because I've come across accounts where his genitals were removed, but I've heard of ones where he was still alive. I've heard of ones when he was dead, deceased, chopped up already, and then I've heard of ones where he was strangled with his own genitals. Which one did you go for?
I mean, I've read multiple accounts.
Yeah,
I'd find the last scenario a little unlikely because it's it's like the
yeah,
anatomy doesn't work for me. Um,
yeah. That was
but
one of
yeah,
the
I
first
mean,
ones I heard. Yeah.
the drawing and quartering is obviously no matter what, whether
Mm,
whether you're only alive for part of it or not, you are alive for part of it, and that's horrifying enough. So
yeah.
that was one of the most horrifying things in Braveheart, for me as a as a teenager watching this, was the drawing and quartering scene where they make it real clear what's happening. It's
Mm,
like,
mm, mm.
oh yeah, we're just going to casually depict his evisceration, literal evisceration. Like, oh, do
But
we really need
what
to? I think we don't need to, but they did anyway.
what is crazy about that one, right? And it was the academic back in the 90s that pointed this out, is that the source says that William Wallace's heart was still beating when
Yeah.
it was removed from his chest. And the academic, I remember watching the documentary on it. Was it we used to have UK TV, and it showed the documentary of William Wallace getting his heart removed. And the academic at the time turned around and says, think about it this way: if the literature is saying that the executioner had this skill to remove that heart while it was still beating, that means he had so much practice and was so well educated because he had done this, this execution time and time and time again, that he had gotten so perfect at hung drawing and quartering people that he was now able to remove people's hearts while they were still
Yep.
beating. Like he knew how to make a show of an execution. Do you know?
Yep. Yep.
Mm,
Yeah, it's I think yeah, I sometimes do wonder though about the scientific reality of that. It's like
yeah.
eventually your body's going to go into shock, right? You're
Yes.
going to you might still be alive, but you're not there.
Mm,
You're not present and participating anymore. So, yeah,
100%. Yeah.
it's a
Because
question of, but these chronicles, as someone pointed out, these chronicles are written for an audience. And the
mm,
chronicles, like modern media, right? Like clickbait, the clickbait
mm,
is not a new concept.
yeah.
The chroniclers had to keep their audience engaged. And if their audience was the king who had ordered the execution,
Mm,
then you want to make certain that it is as horrifying as the king would wish it to have been. Right.
mm,
So we always, just like with art, we have to take these chronicles with a grain of salt. And
mm, mm,
you have to determine the age of the chronicle, how contemporary was it to the actual account? Was the chronicler actually present and watching, or did they hear the account from someone else? Because if you hear it from someone else, well, the telephone game is real fun to play, and it'll tell you just how inaccurate word of mouth recountings are.
mm.
And people like to embellish when they tell stories. They just
Yeah, that's
do.
true as well.
They like big fish stories, not a new concept. And of course,
mm,
people are, if you're talking, you want people to listen. So
mm.
the analog version of clickbait is exaggeration, right? So,
Yes.
no one wants to hear, well, they hanged him and he passed out, and while he was passed out, they did the things and then he died. Like, no one wants to hear
Yeah.
that, right?
Mm,
So yeah, it's you always have to take that into account when you get to these really horrifying accounts of someone's death.
mm. I the joys of it, and as you
Yeah,
said there, perfect for the old audience there, especially when you want to show that message, but also have an echo throughout history that this is why you shouldn't mess around with my, children's, because,
right.
as you pointed out there, Edward the First, he is an interesting character where he does show qualities that he has antisocial behavior, but trying to, as you said there, Jim, trying to pin him down is very funny, Edward the First, because of the fact he justifies everything in his head because he's doing this for his children. He's doing this for Edward the Second. He's doing this for his generations after that. So there is he's a very, very complicated character.
Yeah.
So he definitely is somebody that shows traits of antisocial behavior, but trying to pin it exactly down is actually quite difficult.
Well, and it's antisocial by our standards.
Yeah.
It's tricky. It's tricky to apply our modern morality to these
Mm,
historical events and to historical personages. Now, when contemporaries refer to them as mad or insane or unacceptable, then I think it's fair for us to say, oh, they were horrible people, even by their own
yeah.
standards of their times. Christopher Columbus is a prime example of this, by the
Oh, he definitely
way.
had. Yeah,
He was
I think
considered a monster in his own era.
yes, I was about to say that. Like at least with Edward the First, there's a lot of justification there. Now, don't get me wrong, as you said there, Rachel, I'm very biased. I fully agree. I am full on biased. But the flip side, no, Christopher Columbus. I'm meant to be on Team Christopher Columbus as well, and I'm like, nah, that guy's a pure monster of a human. Even looking at the literature at the time where even his own people with him were just like, I feel disturbed. I cannot sleep at night for the things that we were made to do.
Yeah.
And on top of that as well, even the Emperor Charles V was writing letters to them to tell them to stop what they are doing. But they started to blackmail Charles V because they had so much control of the silver that was going from the New World into the Holy Roman Empire that he needed for his wars.
Well,
That's what, oh,
Charles V was post Christopher Columbus. At least he'd already been, because Fernando and Isabella
mm,
defrocked him. They had him hauled back to Spain in chains. So
yeah.
it wasn't Charles V yet. Charles V comes a little bit later, and then there's
Mm,
other issues there as well. Because the
mm.
conquistadores under Charles V were just horrific people. They
That's what I'm thinking about. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're
Yeah,
right. You're right. You're right.
you're probably thinking of Hernan Cortez and
Yes.
co. But
Yeah, I tripped
by
over.
then,
Sorry about that.
by then, Cristobal Colon had already been hauled back to Spain in chains, and he died in prison or very impoverished anyway. Yeah.
But we can still enjoy Christopher Columbus Day, right?
Yeah, right. Totally. Aqua Breeze. Yeah, welcome. Thank you for joining our community. Hey guys, if you're out there watching, I'm the Creative Contessa. This is Philip from Irish Medieval History. Please like and subscribe. And yeah, take a moment to leave a comment, chat with us here.
Mhm. Eamon, will you calm down there? We told you already. Wait, what are you drinking tonight, man? Go to bed. It's way past your bedtime. Um, what was it called?
Yeah. So Twitchy Witch makes a really good point. She says it's very telling that European explorers and colonizers were considered to be the most disposable people from society, the fanatics and the monsters who just couldn't exist in polite society. Yeah, absolutely. I think we underestimate the kind of personalities that you had to have in order to get on a ship and cross this big, violent ocean to a place that was not civilized by your standards, right?
Mm,
That was completely alien, that had completely alien flora and fauna, had people who were not necessarily friendly to your approach there.
mm,
So, it takes a certain kind of psychology to embark on that kind of journey. And generally, those are not going to be your most socially well-adjusted people. They're just not.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they were considered disposable, 100%. The kings of Spain didn't really care if the conquistadores whom they funded to go across the ocean came back. Fernando
Mm.
and Isabella, they're like, well, we hope you come back because we've given you some money and some ships. But if you don't, it was a speculative investment, right? Like to them, this is speculating on the stock market.
Mm.
So
Mm.
there's no emotional attachment to those people.
Mm. Oh, I fully agree. Kevin, yeah, Eamon's great and everything, but he just needs to be careful by the way he's writing that on, what was it called? YouTube. I understand what he's saying that Edward the First did kick out. How do I say this without activating the bots? Had to kick out the loners. We'll say loners were activating the bots, and they weren't allowed back in until Cromwell's time. But at the same time, you just need to get that. Make sure to write it in all correctly. Obviously, if you're going to put it in there, because of the fact that someone could easily see that and take it the wrong way. Plus, the way that YouTube is right now with Big Brother system and stuff.
Yeah, we
Going
have to be
wild.
careful about how we say things and phrase things. That's a problem for me because I have a sassy tongue. So
Mm, mm, mm,
yeah, history. So comment is history is not black and white. No, it's not. It's not.
mm.
History is a
Yeah.
mess. And the problem is that humans psychologically, we don't actually like messes. So we seek to create order and understanding and clearly cut and clearly drawn lines where most of history isn't that.
Mm.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. There's a couple of prime examples or couple of rare examples of clearly cut lines. I'm thinking the Holocaust, for instance.
Yeah.
But for the most part, history isn't informed by good guys and bad guys. It's informed by gray guys. So,
Yeah.
People who are somewhere in the middle there.
Yeah, like don't get me wrong, like what he did, Edward the First did, and I do understand Eamon's point there. It's just make sure to spell it incorrectly, correctly, because the problem is, yeah, as YouTube did, the censoring of YouTube is very funny. But I fully agree with Eamon is saying there that Edward the First, what he did to people that were loaning out money and then gathering them together and then obviously giving a lot of them the boot, but then putting a ton of them into the boat, putting them out in the middle of the sea and then just letting the boat sink. That's disturbing. I know we were there trying to justify a lot of the actions he did. There's no justification.
That's psychotic.
That is
no.
solid.
You can cleanly execute people, and that's kind of normal for the time, right? Like that's okay.
Mm.
He had people executed. It's not great, but at least that's normal. Just have their heads cleanly removed from their body, or probably hang them until they've suffocated. But at least that doesn't have the level of psychological torture that putting people in a boat and then letting it sink slowly. That's special. That's different, right? Yeah.
What he did to those people was absolutely disturbing. Now, obviously, I'm not going to say it because I don't want to activate the bloody bots into the chat. But that's completely unacceptable behavior. I wasn't Edward the First's biggest fan beforehand because as I was saying, the biased views. But that definitely pushes it way over there. It's easy for me to take sides after that.
Yeah, it's and I mean the comment is that Christopher Columbus, probably had some good traits too. Sure, he wasn't all bad. He was just mostly bad. Even a certain leader of 1930s and 1940s Germany was not all bad. He actually had a Jewish butler whom he purposefully saved from the man was untouchable, right? He was a Jew, and still that certain leader gave him special treatment because he respected and liked him, and even one could say loved him as much as someone with those kinds of mental issues could possibly love someone. So yeah, not even the worst people aren't all bad, but you have to kind of look at the balance.
No, they're all bad guys.
Yeah.
That's right, lady.
Don, exactly. He wasn't all bad. He helped some German people, not all the German people. By the way, because you have to remember that in 30s and 40s, Germany, Germans who were handicapped, who were homosexual, who and were certain religions, who were certain political beliefs, they got tossed into the camps too. So not all the he didn't help all the Germans, he helped certain Germans. Yeah. So just want to make that
Yeah.
clear.
And on top of that as well, ones he deemed acceptable, because wasn't it even a lot of educated people as well were chucked in there as well to get rid
Oh
of
yeah,
them. Like if
absolutely.
you had any view, so even like
Intellectuals
myself and
who did
Rachel be gone.
dissidents. Yeah,
Yeah,
100% gone.
yeah.
100%. So, he didn't help all the Germans, he helped some of them.
Yeah. Basically, ones that shut up and do their work.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so this normally our channel focuses on channels respectively focus on medieval topics, but we also kind of like to let the conversation flow where it will, and then we'll reel it back in. So let's reel it back into some medieval
Yeah.
topics.
Yeah, before we get into trouble.
Yeah, so
We're
the
inviting the
reason
Watsons to go on.
Right. The reason Philip is on today, everyone, specifically my medieval sewing party, which is normally just me.
Oh, don't
Philip,
use
and
Jessica.
he's not sewing anything, as you can tell. That's okay. Because we're chatting, what got us to this point is we were chatting about 15th century Irish fashion. Why were we chatting about 15th century Irish fashion, Philip?
Sorry there, Rachel. What's it called? If you jump over to your chat, not on this one, but over to your other chat, it says that Jessica is sending you gifts and stuff. I think they're paid gifts. I'm not sure how they work. But they're not popping up on the other chat, and that's by
Oh,
Jessica. Jessica
oh,
Ward
thank
is
you.
sending
Appreciate it.
gifts.
Thank you. My big screen isn't showing me the chat at all, so that's fun. Thank
All
you,
right.
Jessica. Really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Hmm.
Let's talk about the Hohenstaufens and how evil they were. Oh God. Okay. Yeah. So Philip, so why did I invite you on specifically during my medieval sewing party?
Well, today and for, I don't know, for the next 2 years, 3 years or so, depending on how long it'll take to construct this,
Yeah.
I asked Rachel if she would be able to both, well, myself as well included, be able to research and find 15th century clothing in Ireland during the period of the Wars of the Roses in Ireland, specifically the clothing of one Seamus MacTomod, Seamus MacThomas, the 8th Earl of Desmond Fitzgerald, his clothing during the Wars of the Roses in Ireland, which in itself, to me, seemed like a really, really difficult task to do. Why? Because I thought it would be very, very difficult to find clothing in the late 15th century. But
Right.
then myself and Rachel live yesterday had a little meeting between the two of us, and we actually found that there was clothing. We quickly found clothing that most likely Seamus was wearing in the late 15th century, which was in Ennis, in what was it, the Franciscan Friary. There was tons of carvings, loads of evidence of what Seamus most likely was wearing. And once again, it was very, very shocking to me. I think it should be shocking to you guys as well, because of the fact that for so long it's been branded as Anglo-Irish, and people always had this idea that Seamus was either wearing English clothing or he was wearing, proper Gaelic clothing of the 16th century. And yet, when we looked at the evidence, that's not what we found at all.
Right. Right.
Mm,
The question was, what is the other channel's name? I think, Eamon, are you talking about Irish medieval history or my channel, which is the Creative Contessa? Yeah. So if
mm.
you're asking about that, I'm the Creative Contessa. My channel's name is the Creative Contessa, and this is my friend and colleague Philip from Irish Medieval History. So yeah, so what we found is what I started. You asked me to start digging into this actually back in, like, I don't know, March,
Mm.
and the more I dug, the more I found. And
Ah.
the more that's why I have all these, primary sources, the
Mm,
archaeology, the wills from Dublin, right? The more I dug, the more I found. And the more I dig, the more I find. So
mm,
as we were saying earlier, I think there's been this bias against viewing any clothing that is even vaguely English as possibly being Irish, right?
mm, mm,
Because
mm.
everyone wants to think of Ireland as this independent independent entity, completely different from everywhere else in Europe, completely unique, no similarities because it's
Mm.
traditional Irish clothing, right? But that's not the
Yes.
15th century reality.
Mm, mm, mm. Yeah, but still, I think the evidence that you've put forward so far still. Oh, thank you so much for that donation. I'm assuming, is that back over in your chat? Yeah, that's over in your chat there,
Oh
Rachel.
ja, jetzt klar, herzlichen Dank. Also sind Sie jetzt klar, Claire, are you German? I've been speaking German at you under, but you've got it's Canadian dollars, so maybe you're not. Thank you so much. That's really generous. Philip and I really appreciate all of you who've done super chats, who've given us gifts. And if I've missed it because I've been chatting or sewing, I deeply apologize. I really am grateful.
Mm, mm, mm. But yeah, to do some research. So the two of us, like, you've got me to do a tiny bit of research as well, and it came in handy, all right, especially yesterday when we had those different angles from Ennis. What was it, the Franciscan Friary in Ennis, when we had those carvings
Right.
of
Yeah.
what looked like, in my opinion, a noble. Would I be right by saying it was a noble?
I mean, he was maybe at the very least a well-heeled middle-class gentleman, right? So not
Mm,
someone who has the funds and the leisure to dress in a well-heeled fashion. So absolutely that could have been a merchant. It could be a merchant dressing like that. So not necessarily nobleman, but someone with means. You know,
mm,
without more details, it's hard to tell noble or just well-heeled because the 15th century is the era of the up-and-coming middling sort, where after the
ah,
Black Death, there's a shortage of labor because there's a shortage of humans because 50% of Europe died in a couple of year periods. The Black Death keeps coming back. Every couple of decades, it resurges and kills more people. So we
mm,
continue to have a shortage of labor throughout the 15th century, which means that the value of human labor goes up, which means that people are paid more in the middle class for artisans and laborers. So
mm,
now people who, say, 200 years before this probably couldn't have afforded fine clothing, now they can. So that's
mm,
why it's much harder to use visuals to determine nobility in the 15th century. It's almost impossible. You actually have
yeah.
to know who the person is.
Mm. Dave, yeah, I fully agree. This is just before, well, technically speaking, they believe that whiskey was invented in Ireland in 1405, and definitely by 1494 in Scotland, it's fully, part of, starting to really take off whiskey. So, yeah, this is just before the collapse of society is right. This
Yeah.
kind of running joke that's been there since that society collapses after 1494. Yeah, I definitely believe in that one for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I will tell you, so you're talking about the rise of spirits, right?
Yeah, the
So,
rise of
so
whiskey and stuff.
but it's not just whiskey. So everyone
Mm,
distillation, it starts off actually as a way for Muslims to, in the first millennium when they invent it, as a
mm,
way to get to the pure substance and to get closer to
um,
God, right? And so they're distilling liquids for that reason, and then they end up distilling alcohol like wine
mm,
and mead for scientific reasons. And then distillation, eventually makes its way into Europe, I think in the 14th century, as in it's utilized as part of alchemy, right? They're trying to
mm,
get to the philosopher's stone. They're trying to find the
uh,
elixir of youth. They're trying to turn lead into gold. And then
mm,
someone gets the bright idea to drink these liquids that they're distilling,
mm,
like wine, like beer, like ale, and cider, right? And they realize that, wow, this has an interesting effect. And so
mm,
basically, once everywhere across Europe, they more or less start distilling spirits at about the same time. And they all kind of almost come to the conclusion at about the same time that they can drink this recreationally. And so it
mm.
really is, it's not just Scotland and Ireland. Gin
Yeah.
in England has a hideous effect on the lower classes, especially, right? So yeah, it's basically the combination of distilled spirits becoming widely available, in addition to the industrialization and the enclosure acts that take people off of their farms, remove common grounds, and impoverish people. Right, all of that together with the ability to self-medicate
Mm,
because of the availability of these spirits. It's a recipe for social disaster all across Europe and the Americas eventually.
mm,
So yeah, it's not just Ireland and
yeah.
Scotland, unfortunately.
Mm. First off, Jet, thank you so much for all the donations. You're going
Yeah,
wild there in the
yeah,
comment
thank you
section.
so
That
much.
means so
Wow.
much.
Wow,
Definitely
really
up in the Christmas
appreciate
spirit
that.
there. And all the donations given so far, both on the stream and over to the GoFundMe. Thank you so much for all that, guys. It means so much for us, especially going into Christmas and stuff. Eamon, you're perfectly right as well. It is, you're saying about the water of life, Isker Bale, as it is in Irish. So in Irish, it's not called whiskey, it's called Isker Bale. And it is translated over to, if you were to directly translate it, it would be water of life in Irish, which is bang on. Eamon hit the nail on the head there, which is interesting. It always causes very interesting conversations by linguistics when they get a hold of Ishkabel. Um, they're always trying to take that apart because it's like water of life. Like, where did they come at? But when you said that there about the Muslim world trying to find a pure version of it, you said
Yeah,
that, and I was like, and then you see Eamon saying that as well. And I'm like, yeah, I was thinking the same thing, Eamon, when Rachel said that, because you said that and Eamon said it about, wrote it straight afterwards. And I was thinking the same thing, Iskabel, which is interesting because I'd love to see what it would be in either Arabic or one of the countries that were experimenting with that. Is there a
uh,
link from Ireland
yeah.
over
So
to.
I mean,
Mm,
it's all translation, right? So I'm pretty
yeah.
certain that it wasn't, that term wasn't invented by Gaelic
Mm,
speakers, right?
yeah.
So it is yeah, the elixir of life, right? So that's
Yeah.
not, it's not a term that you invented, and I know everyone uses it ironically now, the
Mm,
Gaelic phrase, oh well, it's the water of life, right? You can't live
mm,
without it because you're so addicted
yeah.
to it, and life seems so grim without it. But it actually stems from an older idea about why
Yeah.
you were distilling these alcohols,
Mm,
right? You're trying to get closer to God, you're trying to get closer to the essence of matter.
mm.
So it's more about that, and concocting eternal life, for instance.
But
More
that's what
about,
makes it even more.
yeah,
Mm.
less
But
less
that's what
ironic,
makes.
more
Yeah.
literal.
But that's what makes it so interesting because of the fact that in the literature, I think it was either the, what was it, books of the Four Masters, or it's the Ulceranos, highlight the fact that it was monks that invented, well, allegedly started. I don't think it said invented. It said something about them making the water of life whiskey as it's understood to be.
Right,
Well, it is, like, because we're still using the same term today. But that's interesting that it was made within the monastic settlement who were experimenting with the stuff they had, trading stuff in, was it 1405? So it's recorded in 1405 for the first time in Ireland,
right. Yeah,
That's fascinating. Like,
that completely tracks. As Twitchy
mm,
will say about monastic life, monks were, almost every profession that you saw reflected in the modern world by the 15th century. You
mm,
can find a lot of those professions within the monastic communities. And so
mm,
there's a difference between lay monks, who are
mm,
more like workaday people, like who, they're not cloistered monks, they actually do the work of the monastic
mm,
community. And then you've got the cloistered monks, who tend to focus on more godly activities, focus more
mm.
on the prayer aspect of things, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
you have monks who are practicing alchemy, who
Mm,
who are trying, who are conducting scientific experiments, as we would recognize it as a scientific experiment. They might not have,
mm,
because we have a modern idea about science versus philosophy that they didn't have. But
mm,
the point is that they're conducting experiments. And so it wasn't necessarily cynically an attempt to make a liquid that's going to ruin society.
mm.
it was that's I could absolutely see monks in a monastery in Ireland engaging in alchemical experimentation. Yeah.
For sure. Salty Brett is trying to pull us back into conversation again to the
Good for
15th
you,
century.
Salty. Yeah.
Yes, that's what we're
So
supposed to be talking about.
why do I dress like I'm in the 15th century? Because my focus is on historical fashion
Mm,
salty, and my specific area of expertise at the moment anyway is 15th century fashions. And so
mm,
for my live stream, I of course my medieval sewing party, which is what this technically is. I'm actually working on sewing things as we speak. Uh,
mm,
the point is that I am dressing in a 15th century style since I am crafting and sewing 15th century things. Now,
mm, mm.
the next question, Philip, what do you think the next question, the follow-up question to that will probably be?
Oh,
Do, do I do I
go on.
dress like this every day is usually what people
Oh
then ask.
yeah, I've gotten that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And also on top of that, like, where are you guys traveling to next and all that stuff? That's what I used to get as well. And I'm like, I'm going home. I've got
Right.
work
Yeah,
tomorrow. Yeah,
I am home, so I'm not really going anywhere. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I'm dressed this way because that is the focus of my research and my creative efforts on this channel.
Mm,
And I do often dress this way because, like, for now, I'm not changing. This is it. This is how I'm dressed for the day. I'm not going to change out of this and put on other clothes to go do my shopping. I'm just going to go out like this. And
yeah.
it's fine. Yeah. So I don't necessarily dress this way by preference every day, but for
Mm,
my creative channel, this is what I do. And so I do end up dressing this way a lot of the time.
mm.
Yeah.
It's
And
just way
Philip,
more comfortable.
once we make your outfit and you start finally dressing like a sexy 15th century nobleman, will you change out once you've done your live stream, or will you be brave and bold and wander the streets of Okinawa like like a Desmond Fitzgerald?
It depends on what's going on around the place. Sometimes, because we have the oh, sure, you have the military as well. What? How do you deal with the military coming up to you and stuff? Because the
Oh,
military are close knit to you as well.
well, yeah, but I mean, a lot of them do medieval living history. So,
Ah, you see, I have weird Marines around the place. Marines can be quite funny, though. I think.
yeah, well, yeah, Marines are, they're different.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The Navy lads are grand. They
Yeah.
literally mind their own business. But the some of the Marine lads can be not all of them. There's a lot of most of them I'd say would sound out, but even fellas in the Marine Corps would tell you there's some of them are funny, like strange. And if they see
Yeah.
anything strange, they get really strange at it. Uh, does that mean if so? To answer your question, I think during the week have no problems just sticking in the kit. To be honest with you, but weekends, I wouldn't really draw attention on me, especially
Mm,
sometimes Okinawa, as you know yourself, Rachel. Okinawa's got
yeah.
a terrible relationship on the weekends and stuff, so I tend not to draw. Yeah, yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
it does.
yeah,
And I would like to apologize on behalf of my people for Okinawa having terrible
yeah.
weekends.
Yeah, it can be wild. It's not too bad. I live in a kind of funny little spot, but I get like as long as I'm not doing anything wild or anything, I get on grand. Like to be honest with you, but around here, like I think it's grand just wearing whatever. To be honest with you, nobody even bothers me. But
Right.
also on top of that is what's it called? My wife and everybody says as well. It's mostly because I'm a man. Nobody like people just see a male face and are just like, can't be asked.
Yeah, she's not wrong,
Yeah.
unfortunately. Yeah,
Oh yeah,
as a
bang on right.
woman, I can confirm that.
Mm.
Interesting though, in Korea, at least amongst the Koreans, it's the opposite. Like men
Yeah.
will avoid eye contact with women here.
Mm.
Yeah, women compliment women, men compliment men generally.
Ah, right, right, right. Gotcha, gotcha, gotcha.
Yeah,
No, no, it's even like walking down to the shop. Sometimes it's easier to walk with my wife down to the shop and stuff, depending on what's going on around the place. Sometimes it can be funny, like Okinawa's Marines. Yeah, 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 yeah. Very, very true. Um,
yeah. They were. You are right, Shellback. You are so right. Yeah.
we
Yeah,
were
welcome,
talking about
Luki.
15th.
Welcome to the live stream. Thank you for joining us today.
And for everyone else who joined us, thank you so much. And also for everybody that's been giving donations so far. God, especially going into Christmas and stuff, worked so much to us. And also to everybody that has been giving us donations as well over in the GoFundMe to help recreate the 15th century Irish
Yeah.
clothing of Seamus Fitzgerald. That means so much to myself and Rachel, who are trying to bring this project alive.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's clothing that I've been after for so long, but no one else has put together so far. Myself and Rachel have been looking into a whole load of research into this. And although we have seen people put the other clothing to life up in the north of Ireland, up around the Sligo area, I haven't seen anybody yet put this outfit, brought this outfit to life, even not even aware of it. It wasn't until Rachel had pointed it out and started constructing and putting together the ideas of what Seamus was wearing that we now have an idea of an outfit that could have been worn. And on top of that as well, the outfit would be absolutely amazing. So to everybody that has given money so far over to
Yeah.
that GoFundMe, thank you so much for that. It absolutely means the world. So far, we've gotten enough money. You were saying something about us being able to reconstruct the linen, at least. Well,
Well,
trying to be able
we
to
have
get the
enough money
research.
now to buy the linen.
Oh, well,
We don't have
nice.
enough money for the sewing costs yet. But
Mm,
my goal, I think it would be great if I could find, or we could find, some vintage antique Irish linen from the late 19th or early 20th centuries, back when they were still weaving it in these very narrow gauges, because
mm,
that would be more accurate for the kind of linen that they would have had in Ireland in the 15th century, for instance.
mm.
So it would be, yeah, once we get enough money, I'll go ahead and start sourcing the linen at any rate, so we can get the linen purchased. And then when we hit the next amount that would cover the labor costs, then we can move on with that. But the first step is going to be finding the right kind of linen, because yeah, we could
Yeah.
go with any kind of modern whatever linen, but linen that's woven now is not woven the way it was, or the quality or caliber it was back in even 30 years ago, let alone 600 years ago. So it would be great if
Mm.
we could actually find some vintage Irish linen in good shape that we could then use to make into this garment. That would be pretty neat, I think.
For sure.
Yeah.
It's so handy as well. And it definitely means everyone should definitely drop into our live stream tomorrow. Somebody who actually might know the answer to that is Dr. Melissa Shields. Tomorrow, or if you guys are joining us over in America and Europe, will be later on tonight. Melissa Shields will be joining us to talk about 16th century Anglo Irish clothing. In particular, literally, the clothing that we are slightly covering now, which is the Desmond Fitzgeralds. Dr. Melissa Shields has recreated an outfit from Elizabeth Fitzgerald. Dr. Melissa Shields might actually know the answer to that one. So it's so,
What
so
what
handy that we have
what
it
was the
tomorrow.
question? I must have missed the question.
About your linen, the fact we have to research where we could get that linen from and stuff, because Dr. Melissa Shields has
Oh,
put together
oh
an
yeah.
outfit from the
So
16th century.
I'm not aware of any manuscripts that describe the
Uh,
process of linen making anywhere in
okay.
medieval Europe as such. So for the
Mm,
most part, it's based on visuals and the archaeology, and
mm,
looking to eras like there's no step-by-step guide from the 15th century on how to weave linen. Now
ah,
we do know we have archaeology. We have sometimes we have tools and implements that have survived from for example, flax weaving trade in the 14th or 15th centuries. So we can base it by combining it on the archaeology, on the visuals that have survived of looms and
mm,
spinning drop spindles and distaffs, the equipment that is depicted in visuals. But yes, for the actual process, there has to be you have to have input from the archaeological finds, looking at the way linen was hand woven up until the 19th century, for instance. So
mm,
yeah, no, there's no manuscripts that describe it like that in detail. Like there's no how to make linen in 1550,
mm.
but we have enough evidence that we know how it was done. We're like 99.9% certain how it was done. Do I
Thank.
use a spinning wheel? No,
Mm.
I do
We
not.
just suddenly got bombarded by you did anyway, a whole load of money all at once from different people. I maybe what happened there was that there was a sudden delay or something, because you just suddenly got
Oh,
bombarded by a
yeah, look
ton
at
of
that.
money.
Wow.
I
Oh,
know.
I think Twitchy just gave people a membership gift.
Ah,
I'm not certain how that works exactly, but I guess
mm,
they get to have membership temporarily to see what the benefits are, I think is probably what it comes down to.
Twitch,
Yeah.
you're a saint. Thank you so much for all that.
Yeah, so yeah, I have used a spinning wheel briefly, not in any way that I would call giving me any kind of skill whatsoever. I've used
Mm,
a drop spindle. I have not done linen weaving or linen spinning. I've done wool spinning.
mm.
So I have no actual personal knowledge experience with making linen at all. But wheels, so in the Middle Ages, they didn't have what most of you would recognize as a spinning wheel. They had what's called a
Ah,
walking wheel, which is
yeah.
this giant wheel, and you actually stand up and stand back from it. Now you have to walk forwards and backwards because it's so big, and you're working with such lengths of thread
Mm,
that it was called a walking wheel or the great wheel. But what we know is that it apparently produced a lower quality of thread than drop spindles did because we have guild
ah,
statutes that either forbid using walking wheel or great wheel thread in the weaving process,
mm,
or it says you can only use it as the weft, not the
mm,
warp. So it was lower quality.
mm.
So it was actually in the 15th century, still as of the 15th century, drop spinsters or drop spinners are so good with their drop spindles that the thread they're producing is finer and higher quality than the thread being produced on a walking wheel.
Mm, mm, mm.
Yeah.
That's fascinating, isn't it? Because the one I know obviously is the oh my god, you literally just said it 5 seconds ago, which is the big massive board where they're putting together the clothing and stuff. That's the only one I know. The one
The
I think that's behind you as well.
board, the tapestry?
Yes, the one. No, no, no. You know the when they're making the clothing itself, and they have it during the Viking Age as well. Like obviously, I know the
You
spindle
mean
as
when they're
well.
making the fabric itself?
Yeah,
The loom, Loom,
yeah.
a loom? Yeah.
Loom. Mm,
Loom. Yeah, in the Viking era, they've got warp weighted looms that are
yeah.
vertical, but eventually, very, very sort of kind of at the end of the Viking era, horizontal looms are developed, which are the ones that you sit at, and you can make much longer lengths of fabric with a
Ah.
horizontal loom than you can, and much fancier, much more elaborate fabric than you can with a warp weighted loom. Yeah.
Mm, 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 mm. That's fascinating.
We
All
did.
right.
Shellback Bow just volunteered the word for you. The
Yeah, yeah,
loom
yeah.
question
The
mark?
loom. Yeah, yeah. Hit the nail on the
Yes,
head
that
there.
that that thing indeed, Shellback. Indeed.
Mm.
Yeah. So we are really hoping to raise enough funds to get all the layers done. Of course, if Philip is there just in a nice 15th century Irish smock, then I guess that's okay too.
We'll see. We'll get out there because it would be amazing to bring that outfit to life, especially how important it is and everything. Like, especially in the fact that we have the carving there. So it would be amazing. And so far, finance wise, we're really hitting the nail on the head. Like I've only put it out this morning, and we already got all the way up to 176. So with 176, we're getting somewhere. So
Right,
we are
right.
getting out there. So I think we could definitely start hitting those goals inside there. And then from there, you can start documenting and stuff. It's 1,000 times better than what I thought would happen. And on top of that, it's still booming up there. So um, thank you so much for everybody that's donated so far for sure. I'm getting quite excited because I can see those tasks getting done. And then from there, because we've done the research, we have a very good idea of what our goal is now. From there, Rachel can start putting together, finding out where to buy the various items and stuff. Also, on top of that, as well, it's very handy because it gives us a reason to stretch out and see if we can get more sponsorship and stuff. Because obviously, people would want to advertise their goods and stuff, especially the way that Rachel is advertising her stuff by making those videos that shows off, how you could easily make the best of that wool, that linen, creating those items and stuff. I'm sure there's plenty of sponsors and stuff that would love to jump on top of that project. So even the fact that we've raised that bit of money so far is very promising, especially when it comes down to advertising ourselves to get more sponsorship to try to get that outfit coming to life.
Well, here's hoping. I'd really love to see, an elegant 15th century Irishman for once, instead of just a Karen in his armor.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's like you would think if you looked at the representations depicted by reenactors, Irish
Mm,
reenactors, or people doing Irish impressions, you would think that fashions were only the way they were in the 16th century, the entirety of the
mm,
Middle Ages, and or that they're nothing but Karens running around. Like that's it.
yeah.
It's just that's it. There's no one else. There's no women. There's no
No, no.
men just wore armor all the time. They wore
Mm,
their akatans, they wore their mail hauberks, they wore their helmets, and that's it. They wore
mm.
nothing else, right? Because that's all you ever see in
Yeah,
people in the reenactment community these days. It's like,
yeah, because the only ones out there that I can think of is maybe I'm easily be able to correct it. But like the only person I see doing 16th century clothing is Dr. Melissa Shields from a woman's perspective. You're very much right that 16th century Ireland is very male dominated right
it
now,
really is.
which is
Yeah.
weird because there should be, especially Tudor Ireland, should be way more women jumping in there, especially when Irish women had a huge part to play, not just in the Irish Parliament, but also in Tudor court. You have both the Tudor and the Butler women inside of Elizabeth's court playing the Game of Thrones.
Oh
So it
yeah.
is a proper shame that we don't see more of it.
Yeah.
So yeah,
In the Society for Creative Anachronism, we have some women. Actually, we have more women doing Irish impressions than men, probably. But they're
yeah,
literally in the United States. So, in the Irish reenactment community, there's like, where are they all? But it could also be the question of where would women find a place?
mm,
What do your reenactment events have feasts? Do they have dancing? Do they have music? Do they have
yeah,
games? Do they have things that non-combatants would enjoy, or is it just
mm,
battles, 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 battles?
yeah, yeah. Very, very true. And when you just have one or two
Yeah,
people, one or two girls, and you have a whole load of lads just screaming and roaring, yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's
I
it's
see
it,
the problem.
yep. That is the problem. Yep.
Yeah, but there's way more. Like for the Viking was the early medieval reenactment. There's plenty of women, so there is women who, and it's the same thing with High Middle Ages as well. A lot of women inside there as well. But you're right; they do need to, and it's strange that there's not more women doing Irish Tudor reenactment. It is funny, and then you've got 15th century Irish reenactment that really needs to start coming alive. Especially with the Wars of the Roses in Ireland, the fight between the Fitzgeralds and the Butlers over the Irish Parliament, which is the clothing I'm looking to recreate for anyone that just jumped in there. Give me a medieval mass. Oh, aye.
Oh yeah, I enjoy a good medieval mass. They're so
Mm.
sublime and they sound so beautiful.
Oh,
Yep.
you do.
One 100% right there with you, Twitchy.
Myself
Maybe.
and the wife had the weirdest experience. We were going in there we were in Rome at the time, and it was one of the churches to the side. You know how you're inside the big cathedral, and there's one of those smaller churches at the side.
It's
We were
called
inside of them.
Are you Catholic or not? They're called chapels.
Yeah, we were inside one of the chapels. My brain just wasn't clicking to it, right? But we were inside the chapel at the time, and a bunch of Italian people started coming in, and they started sitting down. And between the jigs and the reels, myself and Yuki ends up, falling in with them, and it was so strange because all these Italians just assumed we were in with them, so we just were like, "Oh well, just blend in," and it was amazing. I was there the whole time, and I looked at Yuki, going, "This is surreal," because we even had the priest going up to the very top and doing an entire mass in Latin. And we're like, this is the greatest experience ever. Definitely one of the top. And the fact we did this in Rome made it 1,000 times better. And went up, did the whole entire mass and left. It was good. It was good times.
Nice, nice. Yeah, a good Latin mass. Yeah. Um,
Mm,
I'll be honest, even if a person doesn't understand Latin, that
mm,
can almost make it feel more of a sublime experience, like as
yeah.
though, the way we're not necessarily supposed to understand the nature of God, therefore you shouldn't necessarily have to understand exactly what's being sung, just feel the emotion of the moment, that kind of thing. I mean,
Mm,
I guess as a linguist and someone who travels the world and is often in places where I don't actually understand the language, I
mm,
don't I don't feel I've learned to understand meaning in ways that don't involve words.
yeah.
So, yeah, I guess I'm a little bit of an oddball in that regard where I don't feel like I have to understand the words to understand what's happening
Mm, mm,
necessarily.
mm. True, true, true.
Yeah,
It's just the presence inside there was absolutely amazing at the time. But I
it is.
suppose they would have a higher. Irish Mass is fun as well, but it's its own unique thing, especially when it's done in Irish. It's one of the things that the Irish always fight for, is to have a Mass in Irish rather than English. And when it's not done in Irish, oh, the Irish people get very tick. But I think the reason, well, it is, in my opinion, the reason for it is because it's its own flavor compared to Mass in Italy, which has this more kind of godlike feeling to it. You know what I mean? And
Right.
then we were talking about, well, as well, is Mass in Japan. Mass in Japan, I still dying to go to a good Mass in Japan. We've gone down to the church a good few times, but it's trying because of Yuki's work and other things and stuff. We still haven't gone down for a proper Mass yet. And everyone keeps telling us it's an experience. It's a full on experience you need to do because it's a sudden warmth there. Because of the fact that everybody's just like bowing and they're shaking their hand and stuff, there's a sudden level of warmth in Japan that's very unique. So now I'm
Oh,
dying.
yes, of
Yeah.
course. I
Mm,
didn't think about that. Yeah, the
yeah.
part of the mass where you wish everyone peace, right? Peace be with
Yeah.
you. And you're actually
Yeah.
engaging, like making eye
Yes.
contact, right? You're right.
Yeah.
That would not be standard in Japan at all, would it?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
But everybody, this is why I'm so curious because people talk about it, and there's a weird, it's a really nice warmth that comes in, and everybody I've talked to has said you need to experience Japanese Mass because there's this weird warmth at the end, just coming to the end where you're supposed to shake the hands and stuff. There's a level of warmth there that everybody talks about, and I'm like, I need to experience this, you know?
Right, right. Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah. No, yeah, you definitely do. Oh, that now
yeah.
when I come visit you in Okinawa, because of course everyone, part of the GoFundMe will also fund trips for us to get back and
Mm,
forth to each other for fittings. So my plan
yeah.
is to go visit Philip down in Okinawa to do the first sets of measurements and whatnot.
Yeah.
And then maybe Philip, you and I can go to a mass together and experience this the Irish and the
Definitely
American
do.
Catholics having mass with the Japanese Catholics. How
Mm.
international, but what a metaphor, huh?
Oh, 100%. Like, because I don't want to sound bad or anything, but the thing is about English Mass, both in America and in Ireland, is there's just nothing special. I don't want to sound bad, but English Mass just, it's so standard to me. It just feels standard and normal. Do you know what I mean?
Well, and again, that harkens back to the idea of language having more meaning than just the words themselves,
Yeah.
right? There is a certain spirituality that one
Mm,
can experience when you don't actually understand the words, right? Because then it sounds more mystical, right?
mm,
So that's, for us, English is a workaday language. It's like, oh,
yeah.
English again.
Mm. Yeah, right?
Right? Whereas a mass, say in Japanese, for instance, will
Mm,
have a different feel for us.
yeah,
So it'll feel
for
it'll
sure.
feel more exotic, it'll feel more elevated, even if it's not technically. It's exactly the same words, just in Japanese. You know what I mean?
Mm,
But that's not the point.
mm. We can't be friends anymore. Why? What happened? What did I say? We can't be friends anymore. Oh no, why can't we be
Probably,
friends?
probably because she's Anglican and you said English.
Oh well, there we go. We can't be. No, no, no. Right, you're out. But out you go. I
But
don't want to sound bad, but I'm not a fan of Anglican. Another one that's very kind of, I don't know, I just find it very boring. I think just no, for me, there's no magic outside it. The reason why I'm still a Roman Catholic is just for me, it's just solid feeling there, you know. I just don't feel it in Anglican because I've actually gone to it, and so Zuki as well, a good few times, gone to Anglican mass, and there just isn't the same magic, you know.
right,
Um,
yeah.
and I remember, what was it called? In Ireland, there's always an old person that's going, oh, I need a good Latin mass. I need to cleanse the soul. I need a Latin mass, you know? There is a proper magic to it, like, especially a Latin mass, like,
Oh my gosh. Shellback Bow says there's a community of nuns actually that's shrinking apparently that
yeah.
goes and maintains the grounds. But still, I know I think unfortunately throughout the world, a lot of monastic communities have been shrinking
Mm,
um, as the reasons for people to join monastic communities have certainly decreased
mm,
as socioeconomic equality has risen, as gender equality has risen, as there are work opportunities for women outside the home. But as women become more actually empowered and enfranchised in their societies, women are feeling less drawn to a monastic community just so they can achieve those aspects of their lives. So yeah, there's there's monasteries in Germany that had to close because they just didn't have people to keep them open, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pax vobiscum. Peace be with you. Yeah. Okay, so everyone, we are coming on. I love a good Latin mass. It's a lovely experience. Yeah. I love a good Latin mass too. Unfortunately, in the American Catholic Church, the Latin mass has been hijacked by certain people on the far right end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Pisses me off. Because, like, you don't get to own the Latin Mass. The Latin Mass does not have to be a sign of regressive beliefs. But there's a whole bunch of people priests who didn't support the wonderful Pope Francis and don't support our wonderful Pope Leo in any of their socially progressive means, who tried to reclaim the Latin Mass as their way to stand up to them, right?
Yeah.
And
I
that just pissed me off.
Yeah. I don't get that as well. Is people shouldn't, especially if they're claiming to be Roman Catholic, well, Catholic at least, and then they're because I seen that as well. Is people going against the Pope's recent actions and stuff. And I was like, but what defines you still as if you're so against the Pope and stuff? But anyway, that's a different discussion, and definitely out of my
It is a different discussion, but you hit the nail on the head. It's like, oh, you're a good Catholic, so you should believe in the infallibility of the Pope, right?
Yeah.
The funny thing is, I would never consider myself a good Catholic because I don't believe in the infallibility of the Pope, but there it is. Throws table alongside Christ. Yep, 100%. Okay, well, everyone, this is, we're about to approach the 3-hour mark. So that's usually the time at which I conclude this medieval sewing party in any case. If you've been watching from Philip's channel, Irish Medieval History, then please pop over to the Creative Contessa and go ahead and give a like and subscribe. If you are part of my Creative Contessa community, please do pop over to Philip's channel, Irish Medieval History, like and subscribe. And remember, in both cases, if you want to be notified about when we go live, when we publish fun and interesting content, because it's all fun and interesting, isn't it, Philip?
Yes, it is.
When you want to be notified, click on the notification bell and click all, or the almighty algorithm will decide for you what it is you want to see. And also, if you've clicked the notification bell before, you might need to go and check it again, because YouTube sucks and keeps undoing notifications. Otherwise, I would like to thank my patrons and channel members who have thus far generously supported my work. I'd like to thank all of you who've left super chats and given me those cute little gems and comment and like and are just always engaging in all the different ways you are. I am deeply honored by your support. Philip, your final words.
Yes, I'll next see you guys tomorrow, because we have Dr. Melissa Shields is coming in tomorrow. Hopefully I can get both Rachel and Melissa Shields dressed up, which means the only person that needs to get dressed up now is myself. So please go over to our, what's it called, GoFundMe. Help recreate, what was it called? There we go. Help recreate a 15th century. 1 second, I'll just put it into, actually I can't actually. Not in this one. But anyway, pop on over to our I'm trying to do everything at once.
Community. I'll be posting the GoFundMe link if you want to support me making a 15th century Irish ensemble for Philip. I'll pop the GoFundMe link on my community posts, and I'll try to post it on Facebook, but you all know Facebook throttles links like nothing else. So yeah.
Happy days.
And tomorrow I'll be on mid-afternoon for Americas, later in the evening in Europe with Philip, and we'll be talking about 16th century Irish fashion. And then tomorrow later on, I'm being interviewed by a fellow YouTuber about medieval living history and other topics, and I'll be sewing, of course, so more medieval sewing party to come.
Mm.
Yep. Otherwise, until next time, everyone, stay creative and may your creative adventures be unexpected. Bye, everyone.
See you. Bye. 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 Bye.